The world had changed by the 22nd century. Earth had become a shadow of its former self. High above the ruined cities, a mysterious man arrived. He had finally located his target. Without hesitation, the stranger descended toward the wasteland. The world had become a desolate graveyard. Amidst the ruins, a lone survivor wandered through the wreckage. Desperation drove the young man to scream for help. He searched for any sign of life in the silence. Tears streamed down his face. The protagonist felt the crushing weight of his isolation. Suddenly, a monstrous creature erupted from the debris. The silence was shattered by a nightmare. Another beast joined the hunt. The young man was trapped, facing an impossible fight for survival. The young man felt the cold breath of monsters as he begged for a miracle. Tears of agony fell while the survivor screamed into the void. He clung to a shattered memory of a happier time, praying for any kind of salvation. The protagonist cursed the ones responsible for the world's ruin, wishing for their downfall. As death loomed closer, the young man prayed that the architects of this nightmare would suffer the same fate. A sudden strike tore through the air, intervening just as the beast lunged. The mysterious man descended like a bolt of lightning, crushing the threat instantly. The young survivor could only stare in shock, overwhelmed by the unexpected rescue. A powerful presence now stood before him, leaving the youth questioning who this savior was. The stranger gazed back with a cold, piercing intensity that commanded the entire battlefield. The young survivor felt a wave of relief wash over him. At last, the end of his struggle was near. He looked out at the ruined horizon, hoping that humanity could finally reclaim what was lost. Surrounded by the corpses of the beasts, the youth questioned if a future was truly possible. The mysterious man offered a solemn confirmation. He held the dying boy, acknowledging the weight of the moment. With a final, heartbreaking embrace, the stranger bid the young man a peaceful farewell. The young man felt a surge of gratitude. After so much suffering, he finally found someone. He collapsed in the presence of the mysterious man. Life was slipping away from the survivor. A heavy silence fell over the ruins as the last breath escaped. Jin closed his eyes in mourning. The weight of failure pressed down on him. Kagura appeared, his voice cold and pragmatic. He reminded Jin that arriving late was the only certainty in this wasteland. The man urged Jin to let go of the past. There was no point in clinging to hope when the evidence of death was everywhere. Jin remained silent, his mind drifting toward the tragedy that had unfolded. The entire world had fallen into ruin. Humanity had reached its breaking point. Constant environmental decay had triggered a nightmare. Horrific mutations began to surface from the waste. These creatures became known as corruptors, a plague that devoured everything in its path. The corruptors possessed a terrifying ability to heal. They were an unstoppable force. Even the most devastating weapons of mass destruction failed to eliminate them. Desperate scientists refused to give up. They turned to forbidden human experimentation to find a way to fight back. A method for a counterattack was finally developed, but the cost was absolute. The victory came too late. There was nothing left to save. The mysterious man remained convinced that some souls still deserved salvation. A companion questioned if anyone could have truly survived the devastation, but the protagonist offered a cold denial. His gaze shifted toward the horizon, focusing on a distant hope for the future. The young man explained how his nanomachines were designed to heal the ravaged environment. These microscopic machines served a dual purpose, neutralizing the regenerative powers of the corruptors while restoring the planet. The mysterious man envisioned a future where the planet regained its lost splendor. He dreamed of a new civilization that could thrive just as humanity once did. However, the young man dismissed such thoughts as an impossible fantasy. The protagonist accepted the skepticism with a calm demeanor. Despite the doubt, a flicker of possibility remained enough for him. The mysterious man envisioned a world restored to its former glory. Even the smallest chance of success was enough to keep him driven. He knew that his strength would be the key to overcoming the trials ahead. The scientist gazed at the specimen, convinced that this power was the only way to secure a future. Betting everything on a single possibility, the researcher prepared to build a bridge to a new era. The researcher believed that a single spark of hope could save the future. He was determined to bridge the gap toward that possibility. But the timeline shifted, leading to a world consumed by chaos. Monstrous entities claimed the desolate lands as their own. These apex predators roamed the ruins, ruling over a dying civilization. The planet itself succumbed to the decay, turning into a scorched wasteland of red dust and storms. In the shadows of the fallen cities, only the smallest scavengers remained to witness the horror. A monstrous entity claimed the desolate shores. Time began to slip away as the world decayed. From the void of space, the planet looked like a dying jewel. The countdown of extinction continued. Apex predators dominated the wasteland. Even the strongest beasts eventually fell to the passage of time. Nature attempted to reclaim the ruins, but only silence remained where life once thrived. Eventually, the great monsters became nothing more than bleached bones in the sand. A digital countdown flickered over the planet. The clock was ticking toward an inevitable end. Earth remained suspended in the void, unaware of the numbers marking its fate. Different worlds existed in fragments, each with its own count of survivors. Panic set in as the young girl scrambled away. Every second felt like an eternity. Breath came in ragged gasps. The realization of her situation finally hit her. A monstrous creature loomed over the group. Terror gripped the young survivors as they faced a nightmare. The young girl struggled to process the horror. She questioned if such a place truly existed. Fear turned into desperation. The girl knew that failure to find what they sought meant certain death. A sudden sound echoed through the silence. The young woman froze, sensing a presence nearby. Her eyes widened in shock. She realized they had finally encountered the guardian deity. The young woman felt a sudden surge of apprehension. She sensed the presence of the guardian deity. The group advanced deeper into the corridor. The feeling of being watched became undeniable. Driven by a mix of hope and fear, the girl pushed open the heavy door. Their path ended abruptly. The survivors realized they had walked straight into a dead end. A heavy silence fell over the group. The young woman stood frozen as the trap closed in. The group realized they had walked straight into a dead end. A monstrous beast emerged, leaving the survivors paralyzed by fear. Desperation took over as the young woman pleaded for a miracle. With no other options left, she cried out to their guardian deity for salvation. Suddenly, a blinding light pierced through the darkness. A blinding light erupted, cutting through the tension. The young woman looked on in awe, recalling a promise of hope. A figure stepped forward, emerging from the radiance. The mysterious man appeared, his presence radiating an overwhelming power. He checked his equipment, noting that everything remained perfectly preserved. A vast amount of time had passed, leaving the world unrecognizable. The mysterious man surveyed the remnants of a lost era. Most of the records were lost to time. The stranger wondered how the facility had managed to survive the decay. He suspected that nanomachines floating in the air had preserved the place. A specialized injector sat ready on the desk. The man sought answers about the world's downfall. Only a single message cube left by Kagura remained as a clue. He asked his companions to share their own stories, completely oblivious to his own lack of clothing. The mysterious man admitted to a staggering amount of time spent in isolation. His companions could only stare in disbelief. He reflected on his long slumber with a calm acceptance. The stranger focused on his appearance, ensuring every detail was perfect for his return. A massive seal finally groaned open, revealing the path forward. The group stepped out together, facing the unknown with a mixture of curiosity and dread. The mysterious man awoke to a world he no longer recognized. A staggering amount of time had passed, leaving the Earth completely transformed. The protagonist felt a deep sense of alienation as he looked upon the altered landscape. A young guide attempted to lead the Guardian toward their destination. He remained silent, his mind racing as he analyzed the strange beings before him. The young girl was stunned. The idea of humans existing was impossible, as they were believed to have vanished millions of years ago. Confusion grew among the group. The young ones wondered if these beings had evolved to mimic humans over the eons. A theory emerged. The girls suspected that nanomachines might have been the cause of such a strange transformation. The mysterious man remained composed. To him, the fact that they spoke an ancient tongue was proof enough of their identity. A formal introduction followed. Jin Shido revealed his name, and Hakama Phil responded in kind. Danpo and Shandi introduced themselves to the stranger. The mysterious man questioned what he was expected to do as they approached their destination. A desperate request was made. The young girl pleaded for the man to defeat an invader. Shandi froze in shock. The word sparked a sudden, terrifying realization. Horror struck the group as they witnessed their village engulfed in flames. The young man rushed forward in a panic, calling out for his parents. The mysterious man watched the scene in silence, his expression unreadable. Only charred remains and wooden barricades stood where a home once was. The children raced through the village, surrounded by the heat of the inferno. The stranger observed the primitive state of the settlement, noting how little civilization had progressed. Shock washed over the young girl as she witnessed the scene. The mysterious man watched the unfolding chaos with a cold gaze. A sudden clash echoed through the air. An elderly woman leaped into action, risking everything to hold back the beast. The woman fought with desperate strength. She questioned why the creature had returned to haunt them. The mysterious man observed the struggle. He wondered if this monster was the invader they feared. To the warrior, the creature was something far worse. It was a corruptor, a remnant of a forgotten era. The young girl refused to leave. Her determination to help was absolute, though the mysterious man remained skeptical of her reaction. The stranger decided to test her resolve. He moved with blinding speed to see if she could handle the danger. In a sudden blur of motion, the mysterious man struck. He neutralized the elderly warrior before she could react. A brief apology followed the strike. The man had no intention of causing permanent harm, only to clear the path. With the obstacle removed, the mysterious man encouraged the girl to step forward and face the beast herself. The young girl unleashed her power with everything she had. A devastating blast collided with the beast's assault. The impact was absolute, striking the creature with overwhelming force. The monster lay defeated, unable to heal its wounds. The mysterious man wondered if she had manipulated the very atmosphere to achieve such a feat. The mysterious man questioned if such power was common in this era. The elder clarified that only a few possessed such abilities. The protagonist realized that what they called sacred power was actually the ability to control nanomachines. A young girl rushed toward the elder, anxious to know the whereabouts of the other villagers. The elder had already ensured the safety of the people, but wondered why the child had returned to such a dangerous place. A heavy sense of dread filled the air as the elder admitted that the village was already lost. The previous threat was nothing more than a precursor. That monster had been a mere hatchling. A true horror had arrived, and a swarm of offspring would soon follow to devour everything. Despite the danger, a young warrior mocked the elder's fear. The youth stepped forward with confidence, determined to annihilate the invader. A worried man questioned the safety of the villagers. The youth quickly assured him that everyone had been moved to the shelter. Hakama reunited with her father. The man breathed a sigh of relief, though he wondered where the girl had been during the chaos. The girl admitted she had visited the sealed gate. This revelation sparked immediate anger and shock in the elder woman. Hakama recalled a legend told by her grandmother. A guardian deity was said to dwell behind that forbidden door, waiting to save the village in its darkest hour. The elder looked at the stranger with deep skepticism. She doubted that this man could possibly be the divine protector from the stories. Hakama felt a wave of skepticism. The idea that he could be a divine being seemed absurd. A young warrior laughed, dismissing the notion with complete arrogance. The man's disbelief grew. He couldn't imagine someone of such a lowly race being a guardian. A younger companion tried to insist on the truth, but the warrior remained unconvinced. The warrior mocked the stranger's lack of animal traits, viewing it as a sign of weakness. The blue-haired warrior dismissed the claims with a laugh, insisting that Hakama's presence was nothing more than a coincidence. Arrogance filled the young man as he mocked the stranger, boasting that he could crush such a weakling in a single blow. Hakama remained silent, observing the warrior's blind confidence with a cold gaze. The warrior's tone turned sharp as he declared that the village's problems were not for an inferior outsider to solve. With a final warning, the young man told Hakama to stay out of their affairs. Sarles ignored the warnings. Driven by a reckless desire for glory, the young warrior vowed to eliminate the invader. The youth looked back with disdain. He believed the others were too cowardly to face the threat. Regret and anger washed over the elder. The woman knew that such arrogance would only lead to a swift death. Hakama watched the scene unfold in silence. The chaos of the village's desperation meant little to the stranger. Despite the tension, the elder felt a flicker of gratitude. She pleaded with the mysterious man to protect the children. The elder decided to risk everything. She vowed to hunt down Sarles in one final desperate gamble. Hakama remained unmoved. The mysterious man flatly rejected the request for help. The young girl watched in awe. She felt a surge of pride in the stranger's resolve. He refused to be looked down upon any longer. The protagonist decided that the enemy deserved nothing but death. Suddenly, a massive beast emerged from the earth. The creature's presence signaled the start of a brutal confrontation. A terrifying presence emerged from the depths. The ground trembled as the beast revealed itself. The young man stood his ground. He refused to be intimidated by the monster before him. A fierce ambition burned within the youth. He vowed to carry the weight of his nation and ascend to the rank of a holy knight. The protagonist recognized the danger. He realized he was facing a high-level corruptor. With a surge of power, the warrior launched his attack. He was determined to end the creature's existence himself. The warrior clashed with the beast in a violent explosion of power. Neither side was willing to back down. The creature loomed over the battlefield. Its presence radiated a suffocating sense of malice. More monsters emerged from the depths. The young man was quickly surrounded by the nightmare. A towering shadow cast a grim veil over the fight. The protagonist faced an overwhelming force. With a sudden burst of speed, the warrior struck. He cleared a path through the horde with a single, decisive blow. The beast roared with arrogance, confident that a single strike would end the fight. The warrior launched himself forward, channeling all his strength into a devastating charge. With a thunderous cry, the young man drove his weapon toward the monster. He struck with precision, piercing through the creature's defenses in a flash of light. A cold smile crossed the warrior's face as he felt the impact of his victory. The young survivor fought with everything he had, managing to land a heavy blow on the beast. A deep gash opened across the monster's face, but the victory felt fleeting. Horror struck the young man as he realized the creature's wounds were closing instantly. Seizing the moment of shock, the monster launched a swift and brutal counterattack. The warrior barely reacted in time, left stunned by the sheer speed of the assault. The mysterious man intervened with effortless precision. He questioned if the struggle had already exhausted the enemy. The young survivor stared in shock. He had no idea who this powerful stranger was. With a single gesture, the man sent the beast crashing back. The sudden shift in power left the youth breathless. The mysterious man looked upon the creature with cold indifference. He wondered if such abominations were even truly alive. A simple movement of his finger was all it took. The battle was now entirely under his control. The mysterious man struck with overwhelming force. The beast stood no chance against such power. The young survivor watched in disbelief. He desperately called out to his grandmother to find safety. The youth urged the others to flee the area. Every second counted in this chaos. An elderly woman and her companion stopped in their tracks. They could not believe what they were witnessing. The woman stared in absolute shock. The sheer scale of the battle defied everything she knew. The scale of the beast was overwhelming. It seemed impossible that a single hand could hold back such a monster. The mysterious man grew tired of the struggle. He decided it was time to leave the scene. With a sudden movement, the stranger grabbed the young warrior. He leaped away from the danger, pulling the youth with him. The young warrior could only stare in shock as they escaped the creature's reach. The young warrior was left in total disbelief. He couldn't fathom who this mysterious savior actually was. The creatures were nightmares of resilience. No matter the damage dealt, their bodies mended themselves instantly. Hakama explained the secret to defeating them. Only advanced technology could suppress such unnatural healing. The concept of nanomachines was foreign to the youth. To him, such power could only be described as divine. Hakama acknowledged the boy's effort, but the strike had been too shallow to stop the monster's regeneration. The young warrior struggled to process the truth. He questioned if the man before him truly was the legendary deity. Hakama remained composed. The protagonist felt it was time to reveal a hidden truth. A question was posed about the village's suffering. The young man could only offer a hesitant confirmation. Suddenly, the warrior's demeanor shifted. He rejected the notion that this was merely a local problem. The creature lunged forward. For the beast, this was no longer a hunt, but a personal vendetta. The beast let out a deafening roar. Its hunger had finally found a target. With a sudden burst of speed, the creature lunged forward. The attack was swift and lethal. Hakama reacted instantly. The mysterious man dodged the strike with effortless precision. A cold determination filled his eyes. The protagonist decided to neutralize the threat immediately. A powerful strike collided with the monster. The impact sent a shockwave through the air. A monstrous beast emerged from the chaos, its presence filling the air with dread. The young warrior looked on in horror, realizing these creatures were the result of human folly. Hakama prepared himself for the coming clash, channeling a dormant power. The mysterious man recalled a time from millions of years ago, a memory that spanned eras. With an unwavering resolve, Hakama decided it was time to put an end to the nightmare. The blue-haired warrior questioned if such a feat was possible. Hakama answered with absolute certainty. Memories of a blood-soaked history surfaced. The protagonist recalled the cruelty that birthed these monsters and the tragedy of the last human. Without hesitation, Hakama unleashed a devastating surge of energy. The beast was caught completely off guard by the sudden assault. A blinding light tore through the air, obliterating the creature in an instant. Hakama unleashed a surge of power that defied all reason. The impact was instantaneous and absolute. The surrounding warriors watched in total disbelief. They had never witnessed such overwhelming strength. One young girl felt only pure admiration. To her, the display was nothing short of a miracle. The attack did not stop at the horizon. The energy beam pierced through the atmosphere and reached the stars. When the light faded, only a scorched crater remained. The threat had been completely erased from existence. The young warrior was left in a state of complete shock. He could not comprehend the power he had just witnessed. Hakama stood calm and composed. The gap in their strength was now an undeniable reality. A confident smile played on the man's lips. He revealed that his power was the result of scientific weaponry. Far away, a hidden observer watched the scene unfold. The scale of the destruction was visible even from a distance. The researcher had only intended to investigate the corruption near Kodama village, but this encounter changed everything. The researcher witnessed a power that defied all logic. Even the highest ranks of the Holy Knights had never displayed such strength. Shock turned into a sudden realization. The young man knew he could no longer stay in the forest. A sense of urgency took hold. He had to report this discovery to the guildmaster immediately. Meanwhile, in a different place, a man named Jin listened to a recording from the past. The voice belonged to someone who believed they were already gone from this world. The speaker joked about the cliché of the situation, though the weight of the message remained heavy. A vision of a pristine world appeared, where nature had finally reclaimed its glory. The researcher explained that while the environment had recovered, a grave danger still remained. Even in a paradise, the corruptors refused to leave the world alone. Jin listened in silence, absorbing the warning from the past. A haunting feeling had begun to surface, marking the start of a dark realization. The researcher recalled a disturbing sensation that surfaced a millennium after the cryogenic sleep began. To track the evolution of the world, the man had periodically entered stasis himself. Environmental recovery had begun, and the population of corruptors steadily declined. However, a lingering threat remained hidden from the surface. A predator was spotted, standing over its latest kill. A terrifying predator emerged, radiating an aura of pure malice. The atmosphere shifted as a sudden realization struck. The scientist observed how environmental shifts had triggered a dangerous evolution among the corruptors. These mutated beings were unpredictable, and the researcher knew they would soon become an unstoppable threat. To counter this, the man had modified newborn life forms, granting them a fighting chance for survival. The scientist revealed his intention to leave behind a source of power. The mysterious man questioned the nature of this gift. A glowing syringe held the answer to the researcher's promise. The man injected the serum, allowing nanomachines to integrate with his body. Due to his unique physical condition, the protagonist became the only one capable of mastering this absolute power. The mysterious man focused his mind, preparing to test the limits of his new power. Through the metamorphosis of nanomachines, a physical weapon materialized in his palm. The protagonist admired the utility of the blade. It was a tool born from advanced science. A holographic projection appeared, revealing a researcher who had hidden similar enhancers across the globe. These assets were scattered intentionally to ensure that not everything would be lost if the corruptors succeeded in their destruction. The researcher wanted the youth to experience the world and grow through travel. He worried about the unknown threats the corruptors would pose in the distant future. Despite the risks, the man believed this path was necessary. The young girl ran forward with an infectious energy. To her, this new existence felt far superior to the world that came before. A vision of a peaceful city appeared, a place far removed from the chaos of the wasteland. The researcher spoke with a calm smile, urging the youth to embrace this new existence. His expression shifted, hinting at a hidden truth about his own place in this world. The man's appearance aged rapidly, revealing the heavy toll of time and secrets. Jin listened in silence, absorbing the weight of the researcher's final words. A final request lingered in the air. Jin felt the weight of the expectation placed upon him. The holographic message faded. The young man accepted the burden with a silent vow. The solitude was interrupted. Companions had finally tracked him down in the wilderness. They urged him to return, insisting that his presence was essential for the gathering. Jin remained distant. His mind was already drifting toward a different discovery. The object sparked a sudden realization. It looked like an access key for a research facility. Hakama questioned the origin of the pendant. The young guide could only offer a confused response. The jewelry was a family heirloom. It had been passed down through generations as a sacred amulet. The girl believed the item could summon a protective deity in times of peril. Hakama finally understood how he had been led to this place. A sense of gratitude washed over the man. He felt that his ancestors were still watching over him. The village gathered around the bonfire, hoping for a miracle to save them from danger. A group of warriors rested by the flames, unaware of the guest who had just arrived. The young warrior looked at the newcomer with utter confusion. He could not believe this man was the legendary protector. Contempt filled the young man's heart. To him, the stranger looked like nothing more than an inferior species. Doubt spread among the group. They questioned how such a frail individual could have possibly claimed victory. Hakama stood before the defeated foes. Some still struggled to comprehend how such a slender man had overpowered them. The warrior explained the truth to the others. Those who had fled in terror had missed the true scale of the battle. A wave of admiration swept through the crowd. The villagers were stunned by the radical transformation of the man they once doubted. The atmosphere shifted as a new figure approached. The protector's presence commanded the attention of everyone present. The village elder stepped forward with a humble heart. She felt it was time to express the community's deepest gratitude. The villagers felt a profound debt of gratitude. They believed their home would have been lost if not for the stranger's intervention. The mysterious man remained humble. He dismissed their concerns with a calm demeanor. However, The protagonist had his own goals. He decided that information was the only payment he truly desired. A specific curiosity drove him. The man wanted to understand the current state of this unfamiliar world. The elder provided a lead. She suggested that the royal capital was the best place to find the answers he sought. The royal capital served as the heart of Crumosia. It was the ideal place to gather information on the state of the world. Merchants from Kodama village frequently visited the city to sell their unique wood silk specialties. The journey was known to be treacherous. The elder admitted he was unfamiliar with the safest paths. He suggested Hakama as a guide. The young girl had her own urgent business to attend to in the capital. The girl possessed a rare divine power. A specialized academy existed in the city to help her master such a gift. The mysterious man reconsidered the original plan. Despite the recent chaos, he believed the young girl should still enroll in the academy. The young warrior stepped forward with arrogance. He claimed a divine right to be the guardian's guide. The man's ambition was clear. He intended to travel to the royal capital to join the ranks of the Holy Knights. An elder quickly shut down his delusions. The woman reminded the youth that failing to enter the academy made his goals impossible. The young warrior desperately argued that divine power alone should be enough for admission. The mysterious man coldly corrected him, mentioning the written exam. The mysterious man remained unimpressed. He knew that raw power meant nothing without the intelligence to pass the academy's requirements. Despite the failure, the young man's status as a holy knight piqued the stranger's curiosity. Meanwhile, news of a victory had spread. A massive corruptor that once terrorized Kodama village had finally been defeated. A messenger confirmed the news with excitement. The girl hurried to inform the guildmaster about the beast's fall. The knight had arrived expecting a struggle. He believed only a holy knight could handle such a threat, yet the enemy had already been subdued. The knight found it hard to believe. Encountering a holy knight in such a remote place felt like an impossible fluke. A young woman laughed, amused by the strange coincidence of their meeting. In a flash of steel, the warrior struck. The beast stood no chance against such overwhelming speed. The monster fell instantly. The knight realized that the rumors about this individual's strength were likely true. A newfound curiosity took hold. The warrior felt a sudden, intense desire to truly know this person. A peaceful village nestled between the mountains offered a rare moment of serenity. Hakama admired the morning beauty, feeling the refreshing breeze on his skin. The sight felt almost surreal to the guardian, as if he had stepped into a dream. A wave of longing hit him. He wished Kagura could have witnessed this tranquility. The moment of reflection was interrupted by a hesitant companion bearing his clothes. The young guide felt awkward, urging Hakama to dress himself. The group made their way through the quiet village, surrounded by the peace of the valley. An elder reminded the young girl of her responsibilities as a guide. The young warrior grumbled, feeling that his studies were a hindrance to learning true power. Hakama offered a simple compliment, noticing the young man's potential. The young warrior felt a surge of motivation. He vowed to train harder and promised to meet again in the royal capital. As the group gathered for the farewell, the young guide asked the guardian to take care of the traditional garment. The guardian offered a final piece of advice. He wanted the girl to prioritize her health during the journey. With a final wave to his new acquaintances, the mysterious man began his departure. The young guide followed closely behind as they left the village, venturing toward a distant destination. Hakama and the young guide paused their journey by a serene waterfall. The young girl pointed toward the horizon, eager to reach their destination. As night fell, the pair shared a quiet moment by the campfire. The young guide wondered about the distance to the royal capital. Hakama provided the answer. The journey would take a few more days on foot, which was sooner than the girl had expected. Curiosity got the better of the young guide. She questioned the guardian's true motivations for wanting to learn about the world. Hakama remained elusive, refusing to reveal his true intentions to the young guide. The guardian recalled a grim warning from Kagura about the persistence of the corruptors. Evidence of those monsters still existed in this era. proving that the threat had never truly vanished. However, the purity of the surrounding environment contradicted the known nature of such creatures. Hakama realized that something fundamental had shifted in the world's balance. Hakama's intense expression caused a moment of tension, though he claimed he was merely lost in thought. The Guardian felt a sense of relief knowing that the people of this era had not fallen under the control of the corruptors. He decided that his first priority was to understand how the current inhabitants were surviving against those monsters. To build a better rapport, Hakama agreed to drop his divine title and let the young guide call him Jin. As the night deepened, the two companions shared a quiet moment of respite by the campfire. A peaceful moment by the fire was suddenly interrupted. An unexpected visitor arrived, offering a polite apology for the intrusion. The rider requested a brief conversation, breaking the silence of the night. The stranger's presence commanded attention, radiating an air of authority. Jin remained calm, questioning the identity of the man who had approached them. Argus Ultan introduced himself with an air of authority, revealing his high rank within the royal capital's sacred knights. The news of the knight's arrival left the group unsettled, sparking a sense of dread and suspicion. Karina reacted with immediate hostility, unable to tolerate the perceived lack of respect toward her commander. The young woman demanded that the strangers show proper deference and stand in the presence of their superior. Argus silenced his subordinate, confirming that they had finally found the people they were searching for. The commander intervened, ordering Karina to stand down while he addressed the strangers with a cold formality. A heavy tension filled the air as the leader questioned the identity of the group and reprimanded his subordinate's rudeness. The commander demanded to know their origin and destination, prompting the young guide to reveal they were traveling from Kodama village to the royal capital. The mention of the village caused a sudden shift in the atmosphere, sparking a sinister realization. A cruel smile formed as the commander confirmed his suspicions. The hunt had finally come to an end. The young warrior suspected the truth. He was certain about the identity of these strangers. The man expressed deep contempt for those he considered inferior species. He found the administrative records of the land to be surprisingly well organized. The protagonist's attire caught the warrior's attention. The clothing was a rare specialty from Kodama village. Such high-quality garments were expensive and sought after even in the royal capital. The young warrior recognized the rare attire. He was certain the girl hailed from Kodama village. A sudden shift in mood occurred. The warrior's suspicion grew. The protagonist stood apart from the rest. To the warrior, the man seemed entirely different. The warrior questioned their origins. He found the man's clothing completely unfamiliar. The young warrior explained their journey to the royal capital. He warned that bandits often use children as decoys to lure their prey. The young warrior accused them of playing the victim to hide their crimes. The younger companion denied the allegations with desperation. Frustration boiled over as the young girl fought back against the accusations. Driven by anger, the girl unleashed a surge of magical energy. The young warrior watched the display with a cold, calculating gaze. The young warrior summoned a divine shield to block the attack. He recognized the divine power and saw a promising future in the girl. The young man acknowledged the strength of the sacred knight. A demand for the stranger's origin echoed through the air. The warrior threatened a lethal consequence if the answer was unsatisfactory. Hakama remained unfazed by the aggression. The tension in the air grew heavy as a lethal threat was issued. The mysterious man stared back with cold indifference. He didn't seem intimidated by the weapon pointed at his throat. The young warrior demanded to know where the stranger came from. His patience had completely run out. A warning was delivered with absolute certainty. The knight was ready to strike if his questions remained unanswered. Hakama continued to maintain his silence. His calm demeanor only served to further provoke the arrogant warrior. The mysterious man remained silent. His gaze was cold, unfazed by the lethal threat. The young warrior grew impatient. He demanded an answer, his grip tightening on the blade. Finally, the stranger spoke. He revealed his origin from the Kodama village. The claim sparked immediate disbelief. The warrior's companion was certain it was a lie. The captain's reaction was unexpected. He lowered his weapon, recognizing the truth in those words. The younger companion questioned the truth of the claim. Doubt still lingered in the air. A shocking revelation followed. Jin was identified as the guardian deity of the Kodama village. The captain processed the information. The pieces of the puzzle finally began to fit. The tension shifted as the captain sought confirmation. He wondered if the truth was now fully revealed. With a polite apology, the captain decided to depart. He viewed the encounter as merely a part of his duty. The captain discovered that Jin was also heading to the royal capital. A future reunion seemed inevitable. Seeking to make amends for his previous behavior, the captain offered his support should any trouble arise. The captain bid them farewell, leaving a female soldier behind in a state of complete disbelief. Jin watched them go with a calm, knowing expression. As the group rode away, the female soldier could not contain her frustration, questioning why the captain would suddenly change his mind. The female soldier lashed out, fueled by prejudice and disdain for those she considered beneath her. The young warrior remained silent, though the words left a bitter taste in his mouth. A cold realization dawned on the warrior as he questioned who was truly inferior in this encounter. Even Leah seemed to agree, leaving the young man shaken by the sudden shift in loyalty. Leah questioned his awareness, pointing out a truth that was impossible to ignore. The mysterious man reflected on the overwhelming gap in power. The difference was staggering. The young warrior recalled the encounter. He had attempted to strike 3 times. Every effort had been made to land a blow, yet the opponent remained untouched. The warrior's grip tightened in frustration. The memory of the failure still stung. A surge of irritation flared within the young man. He could not accept such a complete defeat. The young warrior was outmaneuvered before he could even react. Confusion set in as his comrades questioned if he had utilized his divine power. The young man realized with horror that his abilities had failed to activate. He had attempted to call upon the spirits, but they refused to grant him their strength. This failure revealed a staggering gap in their divine power compared to their opponent. The young man realized there was a staggering gap in their divine power. Only one individual possessed such overwhelming strength. Within the entire order of chivalry, the young warrior knew only the grand captain could achieve such a feat. The female knight remained stunned. The sheer scale of the power she had witnessed left her speechless. She admitted her complete lack of awareness regarding such a presence. The realization weighed heavily on her. The young man reminded his companion that the stranger was simply extraordinary, especially for someone who had just joined the unit. The knights pondered the identity of the one who had corrupted the village. All signs pointed toward the same man. A female knight questioned if the stranger was truly a threat. The young leader dismissed the danger, deciding to leave him be for now. The group began their journey back to the royal capital. Despite the quick resolution of the conflict, their duties called them home. The young man took charge of the remaining security, ensuring the guild would handle the bandit threat. He reflected on the stranger's raw power. While the man was a formidable guardian, he lacked the refinement of a true noble. The royal capital stood as a beacon of power. A strong alliance there could change the fate of the entire nation. The young knight weighed the risks. He believed a powerful ally could solve the most pressing crises facing the land. Jin walked beside the young guide. The man recalled a fascinating encounter from the previous day. The girl wondered if every warrior in the capital possessed such overwhelming strength. To her, that person had been truly exceptional. Among the elite, only a few were chosen as holy knights. The man she described had been the finest among them. The young guide was amazed. She had never seen anyone activate their spiritual arts with such overwhelming speed. She explained the nature of divine power. To her, it was the act of borrowing strength from spirits to perform incredible feats. Jin realized the truth. The advanced technology of his time was being mistaken for mysticism in this new era. The man reflected on the irony of the situation. In this world, science had faded into mere fantasy. A memory surfaced of a proud warrior. The woman had looked down on him with utter contempt. Jin recalled the arrogance of those who looked down on others. The concept of inferior species still lingered in his mind. The young guide explained that the current era was home to a vast variety of races. She described beings that shared traits with aquatic creatures and insects. According to the stories passed down from her grandmother, habitable land had once been scarce. To survive in those limited regions, the people had undergone drastic physical transformations. Jin questioned if these changes were simply adaptations to the environment. The realization hit him. Survivors from millions of years ago had evolved into something entirely different. The young guide confirmed the truth. Those who failed to adapt were branded as an inferior species. This divide created a cruel hierarchy where the evolved looked down upon the weak with utter contempt. Jin grew grim as he learned that this systemic hatred led to the existence of slavery. The young guide spoke with conviction. To her, treating others differently based on their nature was simply wrong. Jin offered a different perspective. In his eyes, everyone was a stranger. Despite his cold words, the man acknowledged the girl's kindness. The two continued their journey, walking side by side through the wilderness. A sudden presence interrupted their thoughts, leaving both Jin and the guide startled. The young warrior struggled to stay upright. Confusion clouded the mind of the fighter. The young guide rushed forward in a panic. She wanted to help the fallen warrior immediately. Jin watched the scene unfold. The mysterious man remained calm, observing the situation. Exhaustion took over. The warrior collapsed onto the dirt, barely able to breathe. A strange detail caught the man's attention. Jin noticed something unusual about the warrior's appearance. The young warrior lay defeated on the ground, struggling to catch his breath. Jin looked down at the fallen fighter. The damage was severe, and the situation looked grim. The young guide rushed to the warrior's side, her voice filled with worry and desperation. Jin stepped forward to intervene. He prepared to use his abilities to treat the wounds. However, a sudden surge of hostility flickered in the warrior's eyes. Jin stopped in his tracks. A sudden command echoed through the air, demanding his absolute stillness. A young warrior had taken a hostage, holding a blade to the girl's throat. The aggressor threatened to kill her if the man dared to move. Jin remained calm, observing the desperate scene before him. He began to piece together the reality of the situation. The protagonist realized the gravity of the moment. Everything had become clear. The young warrior was convinced they had walked straight into a trap, though the tension only heightened the danger. Jin realized the danger. The enemy was closer than he had imagined. A figure materialized from the air. The protagonist marveled at the skill used to deceive the senses. The mysterious man smiled. He praised his subordinate for the flawless execution of the plan. The leader stood with his crew. He revealed that a specialized stealth camouflage had been used to ambush them. The technology relied on nanomachines to blend into the environment. It was a perfect tool for a surprise attack. The ambush was flawless. The attackers questioned the stranger's origins, noting his refined attire. A blade pressed against Jin's neck. The captors demanded his complete submission. The threat grew more severe. The leader warned the young man about the consequences of any sudden movement. Tension peaked as a hostage was used to ensure compliance. The girl trembled under the pressure. Jin finally spoke. He called out a name that seemed to trigger a reaction. The younger companion trembled in fear. The situation had spiraled out of control. Jin remained calm despite the blade at his throat. He issued a stern warning about the true purpose of such power. The young girl tried to protest, but her voice was drowned out by the tension. The young warrior laughed with contempt. He mocked the idea of divine power, viewing it as a joke. Curiosity flickered in the warrior's eyes. Jin responded with a mysterious ambiguity that left the attacker unsettled. A sudden, violent blow struck Jin. The attack was swift and merciless. The young warrior sneered with pure arrogance. He viewed the protagonist as nothing more than a lower species. The attacker warned his companion to be careful. He didn't want the merchandise to lose its value. Doubt crossed the warrior's mind regarding the possibility of divine power. He found the idea completely impossible. The young girl trembled in terror. She realized these men were the slave traders the Holy Knight had warned them about. The attacker decided to end the struggle quickly. A powerful strike was meant to knock them unconscious. Terror gripped the young guide. She realized they had fallen into the hands of ruthless slave traders. Hakama slowly regained consciousness. The first thing he noticed was the cold confinement of a cage. The young girl rushed to his side. She had been trembling with fear since their capture. She desperately checked for any injuries. The guardian deity reassured her that he was unharmed. Hakama woke up in a state of confusion. He questioned where they had been taken. The situation became clear. They were held at the base of the very enemies who had attacked them. The protagonists realized they weren't alone. Other captives had been gathered in the same place. A grim scene unfolded around them. Broken people were trapped in cages, stripped of their dignity. Despair filled the air. The prisoners had been completely defeated by their captors. A young woman trembled in fear. She had been broken by the cruelty of her captors. Jin sat in silence. The two prisoners shared a heavy, tense atmosphere. The young woman questioned his lack of clothing. Jin explained that his strange attire had been confiscated. His calmness was unsettling. The man admitted that modesty had never been a priority in his past life. Confusion grew within the girl. She couldn't understand why someone with his strength had not fought back. Jin remained silent. A voice echoed, questioning why he had not simply crushed his enemies. The demand for an end to the conflict lingered in the air. The young man sat in a meditative state, ignoring the tension surrounding him. A young woman approached with food. She was surprised to find him awake. The girl spoke with a mix of guilt and defiance, acknowledging the resentment he might feel toward her. The young man admitted his lack of faith. He had never believed in the promises made to him. He made it clear that forgiveness was never something he sought from them. The young woman listened, her expression tightening as the weight of his words sank in. From the shadows of the cell, the prisoner offered a chilling compliment. He found the situation almost endearing. The youth was shaken. He realized that a true villain would never care whether they were hated or forgiven. The young man accepted his nature. He no longer cared for the judgment of others. A heavy silence filled the room before the man decided it was time to act. He tightened his grip, preparing himself for the confrontation. The blue-haired youth trembled, overwhelmed by a mixture of fear and anticipation. The man remained composed, his presence dominating the space as he faced the youth. The man had been waiting for this moment. He ensured they were in a place where no one could overhear their conversation. The young man desperately asked about the location of the captives. He wondered how the stranger could have known the truth. The stranger admitted it was merely a deduction. The man explained that the youth had fooled him at first. The physical injuries seemed genuine, but something didn't add up. He realized that no villain would hurt their own ally so severely just to manipulate them. It became clear that the young man was being blackmailed. The mysterious man revealed the truth. He had seen through the deception and realized the youth was being blackmailed into obedience. The young warrior froze. The sudden realization that his secret was exposed left him speechless. A wave of grief washed over the young man. He confessed that his younger brother had been taken from him. The memory haunted him. Cruel captors had used the boy as a pawn, threatening to sell him away if the warrior ever resisted. The trauma resurfaced with agonizing clarity. The enemies had promised a lifetime of separation, breaking his spirit. The young man broke down in tears. He confessed the tragedy of his parents' death and his desperate need to protect his brother. The young girl listened in silence. She could feel the weight of his grief and the burden he had carried alone. Jin looked on with cold indifference. To him, the perpetrators were nothing more than filth. The girl wondered if the young man had sacrificed his own freedom to ensure the safety of his family. He admitted it was part of the reason. Jin compared the villains to stubborn stains. He believed that such evil could not be ignored or left alone. Jin warned that leaving even one enemy alive would only lead to more chaos. The warrior paused, contemplating the harsh reality of their situation. Without hesitation, the man delivered a crushing blow that sent his opponent flying. The impact was absolute. leaving the adversary broken and defeated. Jin believed that the only way to ensure peace was to eradicate the evil completely. The young man claimed to understand villains better than anyone. He had seen their true nature long ago. A heavy burden weighed on the boy. He had once been blinded by a different ideal. The young man recalled a time when he believed in the righteousness of a pack that fought crime. He had harbored a deep longing for justice. However, the reality of the city was far colder. The boy stood alone against an imposing force. It did not take long for the truth to surface. The young man realized the world was not what he had imagined. The young man longed for a world where justice actually existed. Instead, he found a society overflowing with people who were nothing more than trash. He believed that a simple, normal life was the greatest gift anyone could have, but the environment the boy grew up in never allowed such a dream to survive. That was why he had to take action. The young man showed no mercy. He crushed his enemies without hesitation. Every strike was precise and devastating. He left nothing but broken bodies in his wake. No one was safe from his wrath. The protagonist dominated everyone who dared to stand against him. The violence became a cycle. He continued to flatten anyone who crossed his path. Then one day, a stranger appeared. A man who saw something different in the youth. The young man contemplated his situation with a cold, calculating gaze. The researcher believed the youth was born into the wrong world. The protagonist showed no hesitation as he dominated his opponent. Two warriors attempted to stop the onslaught, but their desperation was evident. The young man stood victorious over the fallen soldiers, leaving them to question his true purpose. The guard was caught off guard. He demanded to know how the intruder had managed to slip past their defenses. The mysterious man responded with a confident smile. He felt completely in control of the situation. In a flash of blinding speed, the stranger struck. The guard was sent flying backward before he could even react. The impact was devastating. The warrior collapsed, stunned by the sheer power of the blow. Other guards rushed in to intervene, but the mysterious man remained unfazed. He moved with a grace that defied their strength. The young warrior trembled in sheer terror. He could not believe the power he had just witnessed. Hakama stood before him, an imposing figure of absolute strength. The defeated man struggled to comprehend who this stranger truly was. Desperation took over as the warrior tried to plead for a stop. He felt completely powerless against the man's presence. A piercing scream echoed through the halls. The sound of agony ripped through the silence of the prison. Other captives heard the commotion. They looked on in shock, wondering what could cause such a visceral reaction. The young man froze. That scream had been unmistakable. Confusion clouded his mind as he questioned the identity of the companion. The answer was beyond his imagination. A sense of disbelief washed over the girl. She trusted that Jin could handle the situation. The prisoners began to retreat. Despite the orders to leave, doubt lingered in the young man's heart. He recalled the enemy's presence. The man possessed a terrifying level of divine power. The young warrior felt a chill. The divine power radiating from the stranger was overwhelming. Panic seized the captor. He pleaded for a moment of hesitation, terrified by the presence before him. Desperation drove the man to bargain. He tried to guess what the warrior wanted, offering wealth to save his own skin. A sinister realization crossed the man's mind. He searched for something more valuable than gold to appease the intruder. With a cruel gesture, the coward pointed toward the cages. He offered the lives of the innocent as a trade. The young warrior struck with brutal efficiency, leaving his opponent broken on the floor. The man gasped for air, his arrogance replaced by sheer terror. He tried to speak, but the overwhelming pressure silenced his pleas. Confusion clouded the man's mind as he struggled to comprehend the situation. The protagonist stood calm and imposing, while the enemy realized his own powers had vanished. The young warrior felt a sudden void. His spiritual arts had vanished, leaving him shaken. Confusion turned into dread as the young man stared at his opponent. He questioned the nature of the power that had neutralized him, wondering if he had underestimated a mere amateur. The defeated man attempted to mask his fear with mockery, Claiming that true villains would have fled, he continued his desperate taunts, accusing the protagonist of the same arrogance that led to his own downfall. The man mocked the desperate attempts of those who tried to flatter their way out of defeat. He realized that words were no longer enough. A more drastic measure was required. The situation had not yet reached its conclusion. A hidden horror awaited behind the closed doors. The young man stared in shock at the creature, realizing it had been specially kept for a certain request. The young man faced a corrupted specimen, a creature kept for a specific, grim purpose. He realized that flattery was useless. There was only one way forward. A decision was made to unleash something devastating. The youth summoned a total disaster to wipe everything away. A cold determination settled in the young man's eyes. A cold determination settled in the young man's eyes. Without hesitation, the youth launched a devastating strike against the beast. The sudden counterattack left the observer in complete shock. The young man revealed that his strength was not ordinary, but a superhuman gift from birth. Every muscle fiber worked in perfect harmony, granting him power far beyond any normal human. The young man faced the monstrous beast. He had been born with a superhuman constitution, granting him strength far beyond any ordinary person. He refused to hesitate. Against such a corrupt creature, the youth knew only a decisive strike would suffice. Unleashing his divine power, the young warrior launched a blinding beam of energy. The witness could hardly believe his eyes. The sheer scale of the attack left the man trembling in shock. As the dust settled, the young man stood victorious. He looked down at the defeated observer with cold indifference. The young man questioned the next move with cold indifference. Panic set in for the defeated enemy. The man desperately begged for mercy, hoping for a shred of pity. The youth responded with a sudden brutal strike that silenced the pleas. Having regained his belongings, the young warrior prepared to leave the scene. The young man promised to rescue everyone from that place. However, a priority had to be established first. He decided to conduct a thorough investigation. The protagonist believed that without concrete evidence of their crimes, his actions would be meaningless. A hidden drawer revealed a discovery that immediately raised his suspicions. The young man scanned the documents. Something about the records felt off. The strange symbols on the page defied any immediate logic. A smirk played on his lips as he realized the nature of the mystery. The protagonist felt a surge of frustration. The text remained an absolute enigma to him. He decided that Hakama would be the one to teach him how to read these files. The young man questioned the motives behind the capture of the corrupt officials. He decided to uncover the truth for himself. By accessing the nanomachines floating in the area, the protagonist tapped into their internal cameras. He hoped the records from the previous week were still intact. A cold determination settled over the young man as he searched for the evidence. A subordinate questioned the purpose of keeping such a creature captive. The nobleman dismissed the inquiry, claiming the truth was unnecessary for the man to know. A sinister smile played on the aristocrat's lips as he hinted at a hidden agenda. The man believed that something truly interesting was about to unfold within the country. Meanwhile, the protagonist remained focused, observing the situation with a cold and piercing gaze. The town felt peaceful, yet an underlying tension lingered in the air. A group of guards maintained a strict watch over the cobblestone streets. The young woman stood her ground, facing the soldiers with a mixture of anxiety and hope. A sudden realization struck her, leaving the girl breathless. Out of nowhere, a young boy rushed toward her, calling out in desperation. The young man remained composed, though his mind was already drifting toward a new topic. He felt the weight of the gratitude directed toward him. The protagonist dismissed the divine praise, preferring to keep his true nature a secret. Curiosity arose regarding the identity of the soldiers who had captured the criminals. The truth was revealed as the group was introduced to the local guildmaster. The local authority was introduced to the group. This man held the highest rank in the town. He looked upon the stranger with a keen, calculating gaze. The guildmaster questioned if the young man was the one responsible for ending the chaos. Padrak formally introduced himself and expressed his gratitude for the assistance. Despite the polite gesture, The elder's eyes remained sharp and suspicious. The young man's effortless victory sparked a deep suspicion. Despite his unassuming appearance, his instincts suggested a hidden power. The elder reflected on the endless reports of damage and the desperate pleas to stop the bandits. A question arose about why the local lord had not intervened to capture the criminals. The answer lay in the strict hierarchy of the land. Only the guild, sworn to the king, possessed the authority to handle such crimes. Even the lord of these lands was subject to the crown's law, though the elder doubted such a betrayal would ever occur. The young man compared the local power structure to a government, viewing the lord as a mayor and the guild as the police. A sinister thought crossed the protagonist's mind. He wondered if Lord Champion was truly as honorable as he seemed. The elder presented a recovered document, hoping it would provide the necessary evidence. The man's eyes widened as he realized the paper was a list of collaborators who had dealt with bandits. The document held the key to a massive operation. With this evidence, every traitor could be brought down at once. A cold realization settled in. The man saw through the facade, recognizing the true nature of the villain. He dismissed the trivialities of the conversation. Now, a more pressing priority demanded his attention. The fate of the liberated slaves remained uncertain. The guild offered a glimmer of hope for those with a known identity. For the forgotten and the nameless, the guild's responsibility ended. Many were left with nowhere to go. The guild's mercy had limits. For those who didn't meet the requirements, there was no help to be found. Hakama remembered the tragedy of the two siblings. They had lost everything, including their parents. The official remained cold. There were no shelters available for the displaced. A cruel reality surfaced. Because of their lineage, the children were considered inferior and unfit for employment. Hakama observed the injustice. It seemed that prejudice existed even in this place. Hakama felt a surge of sympathy for the siblings. He wanted to help, but the harsh reality of their social standing made finding work nearly impossible. A sudden thought crossed the protagonist's mind. He paused, realizing there might be a way out. The young man offered them a potential opportunity. He asked if they would be willing to go if he could find a place for them. A confident smile played on his lips. He already had a specific location in mind. Hakama thought of a place that would be perfect for them, regardless of the prejudices they faced. The expedition returned to the grand estate under a clear sky. A sudden, unsettling feeling washed over the young knight. His companion noticed the hesitation and questioned him, but the warrior dismissed it as a mere chill. Despite his calm words, the young man remained on edge. He decided to end the journey there and dismounted from his horse. The expedition had finally come to an end. The warriors were granted a well-deserved rest. Lord Argus returned to his estate, where servants waited to assist the noble knight. A formal welcome awaited him. The staff bowed in unison, showing their absolute loyalty. The young man wasted no time. He immediately sought a report on any recent developments. A heavy silence followed. The butler's hesitation did not go unnoticed. Lord Argus sensed a strange tension in the air. He wondered if something had happened in his absence. A subordinate approached with a hesitant apology, but the noble knight dismissed the pleasantries with cold indifference. The man's bluntness left the attendant unsettled. A heavy atmosphere filled the hall. From a distance, a young woman watched the interaction in silence. She observed every detail from the balcony. The girl remained hidden, her expression grim as she listened to the unfolding conversation. The young man acknowledged the report with a cold demeanor. He dismissed the subordinate quickly, leaving the matter unsettled. A heavy weight pressed upon the protagonist. The truth was far more grim than he had initially imagined. Chaos had erupted within the royal capital. Monstrous creatures had breached the walls, leaving civilians in a state of pure terror. The young man refused to believe it was a simple accident. He suspected a calculated betrayal from within. A dark realization dawned on him. Someone had intentionally opened the gates to let the monsters in. The Harnisk Academy stood as a fortress of secrets. Its strict policies against outsiders only made the institution more suspicious. A desperate need for an ally had arisen. The protagonist searched for someone capable of assisting him. 3 days had passed since the bandits were defeated. The group continued their journey through the wilderness. Powell felt a wave of insecurity. The young man doubted if someone of his standing could truly find a place in the royal capital. Jin offered a reassuring smile. He reminded Powell of his skills and urged the youth to have more confidence in himself. Jin offered a reassuring smile. He urged the youth to believe in his own abilities. The young guide suddenly spotted their destination. She pointed toward the horizon with excitement. Jin looked on, his expression neutral as he processed the sight. The group stopped to admire the view. The royal capital stretched out before them in all its grandeur. They entered the city, where the bustling atmosphere and towering architecture felt overwhelming. Padrak and his companions were amazed by the vibrant energy of the city. The young guide explained that the royal capital relied heavily on imports to thrive. She mentioned the local specialties brought by the people of Kadama village, though Padrak noted she had already said that. The protagonist felt a sense of curiosity as he encountered insect-like beings among the crowd. The diverse convergence of different races and civilizations had created a truly unique development for the city. The city's prosperity was evident in its bustling markets and the quality of its imported goods. The atmosphere felt safe and the streets remained impeccably clean. Padrak remained skeptical, sensing that the surface perfection hid a darker truth. Beneath the facade of order, systemic inequality and oppression plagued the marginalized. The young man realized that every era carried its own burden of suffering. Padrak reflected on the nature of time. He realized that every era carried its own set of burdens. The group discussed their limited window of opportunity. Enrollment at the Harnisk Academy would only begin after the exams. A noblewoman watched them with cold disdain. She couldn't fathom why such an inferior species would attempt to join the academy. They finally reached their destination. The royal capital loomed before them, promising a new beginning. The children were overwhelmed with joy. For the first time in a long while, they felt a sense of safety and excitement. The group finally found a place to rest. After so much hardship, a decent bed felt like a luxury. Padrak looked around the room. They had reached the royal capital, but his mind was already racing toward the next step. Survival required more than just a roof over their heads. The protagonist knew that gold was the only thing that mattered in this era. A reward from a recent battle provided some relief, but the funds were limited. Padrak had already shared a portion with those he rescued. Financial stability was only part of the problem. The young man also needed to find a way to secure employment for his companions. Finding that man would be the fastest solution, but Padrak lacked the necessary connection to locate him immediately. The young man pondered his next move in silence. He decided that investigating the corruptors of this era was a higher priority. Malicious individuals were already planning to exploit others for their own gain. Padrak recognized the danger these corruptors posed and vowed not to let them act freely. Hakama viewed the corruptors as a lethal threat. He vowed that such a dark era would never return. The young man reflected on the peace of the town, determined to protect it from past tragedies. The young guide questioned Hakama about how people in this land typically conducted their research. She explained that in the village of Kadama, resources were scarce and books had to be shared among everyone. However, the girl suggested a better alternative, mentioning the vast library located in the royal capital. Jin wondered if the city possessed a library. It was a resource he desperately needed. The young man realized such a place would be perfect for finding clues about Kagura's old research facility. However, the receptionist quickly shut down his hopes. Access was not granted to everyone. The woman explained that the books were national property. Such treasures were strictly protected from the general public. Only recognized students, professors, or nobility from the royal capital were permitted entry. Jin's options were disappearing. Jin admitted his limitation with a calm expression. The inability to read was a significant hurdle. The young man recalled the efforts to learn, though the skill had not yet been fully mastered. A heavy sigh escaped him as he contemplated his next move. The situation felt increasingly stagnant. Two hooded figures watched from the shadows. They looked upon the group with blatant contempt. An abrupt interruption broke the silence. A stranger stepped forward with a challenging request. An aggressive attack came out of nowhere. The beast man lunged forward with lethal intent. The mysterious man reacted instantly. He blocked the strike with effortless precision. The stranger remained unfazed by the assault. He questioned the quality of the local security with a cold irony. The beast man smirked, confident that his opponent had underestimated the danger. A surge of power erupted. The mysterious man's eyes sharpened as he prepared to counter. The beast man launched a sudden, powerful strike. The mysterious man intercepted the blow with flawless timing. The shockwave from the collision rippled through the air, leaving the surrounding crowd in a state of shock. The attacker remained composed, praising the stranger for his sharp instincts. Fury suddenly overtook the warrior. He unleashed a desperate, explosive attack fueled by raw hatred. The mysterious man didn't flinch. He calmly absorbed the impact, preparing a devastating response. The young warrior unleashed a torrent of flames, hoping to incinerate his opponent. Despite the onslaught, the mysterious man remained unfazed, wearing a confident smirk. In a flash, the stranger bypassed the fire and slammed the attacker into the ground. The young warrior gasped for air as a powerful grip tightened around his throat. The mysterious man dismissed the defeated fighter, telling him to return only when he had gained true strength. The mysterious man dismissed his opponent with cold indifference. He challenged the defeated warrior to return only if he found the courage to face him again. Nearby, a young woman and a child watched in shock. They were terrified that such divine power was being unleashed in the heart of the city. The protagonist questioned the attackers about their true motives. In response, the mercenaries claimed that someone had decided the group was merely an obstacle. A realization dawned on the young man. It became clear that these fighters had been hired by an outside party. Rather than feeling threatened, the protagonist found the situation amusing. This unexpected turn of events actually played right into his hands. The beast man suggested a simple escape from the royal capital to avoid further danger. However, the young man remained unfazed, deciding to wait until things became truly critical. The beast man was genuinely surprised by such a bold response. In a sudden blur of motion, a powerful grip seized the beast man's arm. The situation shifted instantly. The protagonist overpowered the warrior, slamming him violently against the ground. Gasping for air, the beast man realized he had severely underestimated his opponent. This man was no inferior species. The mysterious man asserted his dominance, demanding that everyone remain still. A female warrior watched the chaos with annoyance, frustrated that her day off had been ruined by a street brawl. The tension escalated as the woman prepared to intervene, while the man threatened to throw everyone in prison. The protagonist remained calm, satisfied that causing a scene had finally achieved his goal. Recognition sparked in the warrior's eyes as she realized she had encountered that same inferior species from before. The female warrior recognized the man immediately. Her voice dripped with contempt as she recalled his low status. A cruel smile played on her lips. She took pleasure in the opportunity to belittle him once again. The warrior accused the protagonist of showing a complete lack of respect by causing trouble in the royal capital. She laughed mockingly, asserting that an inferior would always remain inferior regardless of the circumstances. A witness stepped forward to intervene. The woman attempted to explain that the situation had been a matter of self-defense. The female warrior claimed that her actions were merely a matter of self-defense. The defeated man lay on the ground, feeling a strange sense of familiarity. The warrior questioned if the young men were students from the Harnisk Academy. A flicker of concern crossed her mind as she hoped a certain lady was not involved in the chaos. She quickly dismissed the thought, pretending she had only been talking to herself. The young man questioned why the Holy Knights were conducting patrols, assuming such duties belonged to the guild. The knight explained that the royal capital was vast, and her presence was simply to maintain public order. A sense of awe washed over the girl as she sensed the overwhelming strength of the man. She recalled the students from before, realizing that the powerful individuals in this city were far from few. The warrior bid them farewell, warning the group to avoid causing trouble within the capital. Hakama requested to be taken to a specific destination, The knight questioned the nature of the place he wanted to visit. Their destination was revealed as the Argus mansion. The knight recalled a previous promise and questioned why Hakama had come to seek help. The warrior noticed that the group had grown since their last encounter. The knight recalled a previous encounter and questioned the reason for the visit. A chance meeting had led to a rescue mission against a group of bandits. The protagonist had dealt with the threat swiftly before leaving the rest to the guild. The knight was stunned by the feat and wondered why the young man had helped those girls. The protagonist explained that the girls were familyless outcasts, viewed as inferior by society. The knight questioned why the young man hadn't tried to find the girls some work. The protagonist felt no obligation to care for them, yet he remained steadfast in his ways. Having saved them regardless of the circumstances, the young man decided to see their protection through to the end. The two girls looked on with hope, unaware of the decision being made for their future. A generous offer was made. The protagonist allowed them to live and work within the mansion. A generous offer was made. The girls were granted the chance to live and work within the mansion. The opportunity seemed too good to be true. However, the offer came with a specific requirement. The young man was expected to serve as an instructor. Argus considered the young man's presence. He believed the protagonist possessed the right appearance for the role. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the girl bowed deeply to Argus, though the man remained indifferent to her thanks. The young girl expressed her deep gratitude, but Argus remained indifferent to her thanks. Argus entrusted the training of the two girls to the protagonist, demanding that they not be discriminated against. The young man sensed a catch. He suspected that the offer to become an instructor came with a hidden condition. Argus praised the protagonist's quick intuition, noting that such perception would be useful. Despite knowing nothing of the man's past, Argus decided to trust him with a secret mission, an undercover investigation at Harnisk Academy. Argus decided to trust the young man with a secret mission. He wanted him to conduct an undercover investigation at Harnisk Academy. The protagonist felt a sense of confusion. He wondered what this request was truly about. The situation in the country was dire. Multiple factions fought for supremacy while the king lay dying from a severe illness. With the monarch's time running out, a ruthless struggle for succession had already begun in the shadows. The danger grew as those with no legal right to the throne began to cast their greedy eyes upon the kingdom. The kingdom faced a dire crisis. With the king bedridden and dying, a ruthless struggle for succession had already begun in the shadows. Greedy factions sought power by any means, using infiltrators and dragging innocent people into their dangerous schemes. The protagonist realized the threat was far greater than a simple local matter. Dangerous individuals operated from the darkness of the capital, and their hideout needed to be uncovered immediately. One location stood out as the most suspicious. The Harnisk Academy was the primary target. The protagonist identified the Harnisk Academy as the most suspicious location. He decided to infiltrate the institution immediately. A guide was assigned to assist the young man during his stay. The introduction was handled by a high-ranking official. The official introduced his younger sister, Melia, who was already a student at the academy. Melia looked upon the stranger with immediate disdain. She questioned why such an inferior person was being trusted with a covert mission. The young woman's arrogance was blatant. She viewed the protagonist as nothing more than a low-born nuisance. Melia showed no hesitation in expressing her disdain. She viewed the stranger as a mere inferior. The young woman believed the mission was far too important to be entrusted to someone of his low standing. Despite the tension, a polite apology was offered to smooth over the conflict. The man noted that the talented girl shared the same prejudices as those around her. The blonde woman clarified that the task involved more than just infiltration. It required the role of an instructor. The mission required more than just stealth. The target had to serve as an instructor. Melia doubted whether someone of such low standing possessed the necessary qualifications. The young girl tried to defend Jin, though his inability to read made the argument difficult. Despite the setbacks, the girl insisted that Jin possessed unique knowledge that no one else could provide. She believed the young man was far more incredible than any of them. The young girl defended Jin with passion. She believed the young man possessed a greatness that surpassed everyone in the room. The blonde knight acknowledged the man's strength. He admitted that such power could easily keep students in line. However, the knight remained skeptical. He believed that being a true instructor required far more than just raw force. The young woman felt a wave of regret. She suspected that a certain lady was the true mastermind behind the bandits' actions. The knight offered a formal apology and promised a stern lecture for the culprit. Jin, however, remained completely indifferent. The protagonist remained indifferent to the apology. His mind was already on the practicalities of his new role. The knight suggested that the young man teach spiritual arts. He believed the protagonist's skills were more than sufficient. The knight questioned if his evaluation was wrong. He was certain of the man's immense talent. A simple foundation was all that was required. The knight listed the elemental basics that needed to be taught. The requirements were straightforward. The protagonist was expected to master at least 2 of the 4 primary arts. The knight was stunned by the display of power. He couldn't believe his eyes. Such rare spiritual arts were mastered by only a handful of people in the world. The protagonist found the situation amusing. It seemed the bandits he had faced were actually considered elite in this era. A smirk played on the young man's lips. He decided it was time to challenge the status quo. He intended to flip the common sense of this age on its head. A week had passed, and the day of the entrance exam at Harnisk Academy had finally arrived. The atmosphere was tense as the candidates awaited their fate. A high-ranking official welcomed the guests, expressing his gratitude for their presence. The man acknowledged the prestige of the 7th unit, noting how rare it was for them to be available. The knight dismissed the concern, explaining that their visit was simply a matter of scheduling. The knight remained humble, insisting that the visit was merely a matter of their scheduled turn. Every year, the Holy Knights rotated their members to serve as special instructors at the academy, and this time, the responsibility fell to the 7th unit. The young man introduced himself as the appointed representative for the mission. The official remained silent, contemplating the presence of the visitor. With a polite gesture, the guide led the way forward. The guide politely led the way. The young man was escorted toward a meeting with the academy's leadership. The director waited in silence, observing the visitor with a keen eye. The knight offered a respectful greeting, acknowledging the long time that had passed since their last encounter. The director praised the young man's growth, noting how he had evolved into a distinguished knight since his days as a top student. The director expressed gratitude for the cooperation. He had heard various rumors regarding the young man's recent activities. The director noted that the protagonist was entangled in both spiritual arts and internal factional disputes. While the director understood the lack of available manpower due to their current workload, he remained firm. The academy's prestige was paramount, and any lack of respect would not be tolerated. The knight praised the young man's abilities. He believed the youth surpassed everyone in his unit. A sense of conviction filled the warrior. The knight emphasized that this superiority was most evident in combat techniques. He remained certain of the young man's martial prowess. The director listened in silence, reluctantly accepting the assessment. The director reluctantly conceded to the terms. However, a sudden outburst of anger disrupted the meeting. The official expressed deep disgust, claiming the academy's prestige was at stake. He viewed the appointment as a direct insult to their sacred institution. Lord Gita remained composed and asked Lord Rudman for his perspective. The officials agreed that the student body consisted mostly of nobility. They believed that anyone from an inferior race would face immediate rejection from both students and faculty. The consensus was clear, as their opinions aligned perfectly. Despite the prejudice, a decision was made to hear the outsider's side of the story. Jin Shido stepped forward, offering a polite apology for his late arrival. Jin Shido introduced himself and explained his origin. The young man remained composed despite the tension in the room. A question lingered in his mind that needed an answer. He challenged the officials to clarify if his race or his lack of skill was the true obstacle. The response was blunt. Only raw ability mattered in this place. The instructor dismissed any concerns about origin, stating that only raw ability mattered. A challenge was issued to settle the matter once and for all. Jin Shido remained silent as the tension mounted. The man noted that the entrance exams had cleared the area of other students. He mocked the protagonist, suggesting the privacy would spare him from a public humiliation. The students watched in confusion as the situation shifted toward a confrontation. The terms were set. Only spiritual arts would be permitted in the coming clash. This fight served as a practical examination to verify the man's capabilities. Curiosity grew among the onlookers, wondering if the new instructor truly possessed the power he claimed. Jin Shido remained unimpressed, viewing the entire ordeal as a waste of his time. Jin Shido viewed the entire ordeal as a complete waste of his time. The opponent decided to test the limits of someone he considered to be from an inferior race. Anticipation grew as the crowd prepared to witness the man fight in person for the first time. The warrior believed that those of lower birth lacked the physical capacity and the strength to manifest sacred power. A flicker of doubt remained, as the man hoped his judgment had not been mistaken. The tension peaked as the challenge was finally issued. The warrior stepped forward, eager to prove his superiority by making the first move. A group of students watched in stunned silence, unable to look away from the unfolding confrontation. The opponent smirked, noting the small number of witnesses to the coming defeat. He felt a surge of confidence, knowing the students would soon witness his overwhelming power. Jin Shido unleashed his energy, asserting his dominance. The young warrior surged forward with an overwhelming force. He mocked his opponent, dismissing him as an inferior being. The man boasted about his academic achievements to justify his strength. The opponent gasped, completely blindsided by the sudden display of power. Jin Shido dismissed the notion that his opponent was a worthy rival. The man hesitated, knowing such immense power should not be used against a mere person. Despite his doubts, the protagonist realized he had no other choice. Jin Shido decided to grant his opponent a brief glimpse of his true strength. A surge of energy erupted, leaving the witness completely stunned. The young knight was left in a state of complete disbelief. A similar shock mirrored on the woman's face as she witnessed the display. The opponent felt the crushing weight of an invisible force. Confusion turned into sheer terror as the man struggled to comprehend the situation. He lay defeated, overwhelmed by a power that defied all logic. The opponent was left in a state of utter confusion, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Jin Shido calmly explained that he had simply manipulated the gravity around the man, showcasing a spiritual art the other had never encountered. The young man felt a surge of confidence, realizing he had much to teach at this academy. His ambition extended beyond the students, as he intended to give a lesson to everyone present. The sheer pressure of the technique left the adversary struggling and breathless. The opponent reacted with pure shock, unable to comprehend the force that had just struck him. Jin Shido calmly revealed the nature of his power, leaving the man bewildered by the spiritual arts. The adversary refused to accept the truth, dismissing the overwhelming display as a mere trick. Desperation clouded the man's judgment as he struggled to rationalize his defeat. Onlookers watched in silence, recognizing that the gap in their abilities was far wider than they had imagined. The young woman and her companion were left in total shock by the display of power. She struggled to process what she had just witnessed. A sense of disbelief washed over the blonde woman. The young woman concluded that such high-level spiritual arts were impossible for someone of a lower race. Indignation flared within her as she questioned how a supposed inferior could possess divine power. The young woman felt a surge of indignation. She believed that someone of a lower race should never possess such divine power. Confusion gripped her as she struggled to understand the man's true identity. A new chapter began as the students gathered for a formal orientation. The academy's true purpose was revealed. It was not merely a place of study, but a forge for warriors capable of defeating the corridors. The stakes were absolute. Those who failed to keep pace would be expelled without mercy. The path to becoming a holy knight was open to all, provided they possessed the necessary skill. Success depended entirely on individual merit rather than birthright. This year brought a surge of new students, including an unusual number of commoners. Lias appeared, greeting the young woman with a casual air. The young man questioned her presence at the ceremony, doubting her usual lack of concern for others. A young woman questioned the man's sudden interest in the ceremony, doubting his usual indifference toward others. She reminded him that a prestigious noble was among the newcomers, suggesting he might want to make a favorable impression. The conversation shifted as they noticed someone unexpected occupying a seat reserved for professors. The young woman asked for the man's honest opinion regarding the stranger's presence. With a look of disdain, the man dismissed the individual as nothing more than a member of an inferior race. The man dismissed the stranger as a member of an inferior race, conceding that the observation was likely correct. A heavy silence fell over the room as the tension mounted. The sheer size of the academy meant that any investigation would be a grueling and lengthy process. Jin Shido found the judgmental stares irritating and decided that his first priority was to shatter the image of his supposed inferiority. The young man realized that standing out too much would only make him the prime suspect of the entire institution. A sinister smile played on the man's lips. He was hiding his true intentions. The instructor decided to resume the spiritual arts lessons. He wanted to ensure the elite students didn't fall behind the newcomers. Despite their status, the instructor warned the class to stay alert. Complacency was a dangerous path. Jin Shido looked out at the nearly empty classroom. The lack of attendance was glaring. A blonde student responded with cold indifference. The lack of motivation was obvious. The instructor sighed, realizing the situation was far from ideal. He acknowledged the tension in the room, knowing the students held deep prejudices. The atmosphere remained cold as the instructor attempted to maintain order. Jin Shido stepped forward to introduce himself to the skeptical class. The young man explained his role as their new teacher for the spiritual arts. Jin Shido introduced himself as the new instructor for the spiritual arts. A student immediately questioned if the man was actually qualified for such a role. The instructor dismissed the doubt, challenging the student to judge for himself. A stern warning followed, as the teacher established a strict boundary for the class. Jin Shido demonstrated his power, while emphasizing that such strength must never be used against humans. Jin Shido issued a stern warning. This power was never meant to be used against other people. The instructor explained that spiritual arts could nullify the regenerative abilities of corroded ones. However, such suppression didn't work on human bodies, meaning the technique would only cause physical injury. The ability had been crafted for a single, lethal purpose: the total destruction of the corroded. A young woman pleaded for restraint, hoping the students would not abuse such a dangerous gift. The opponent dismissed the notion of morality, claiming that power was the only thing that truly mattered. He admitted to being curious about what a member of an inferior race could possibly teach. The man mocked Jin Shido, suggesting that the request to avoid spiritual arts was merely a mask for cowardice. A wave of laughter erupted from the surrounding students as they joined in the ridicule. Jin Shido remained unfazed, meeting the mockery with a cold and steady gaze. Jin Shido remained calm, offering a deal to end the conflict. The young warrior felt insulted by the suggestion. He demanded that Jin Shido unleash his full power to prove his worth. The warrior believed a single scratch would be enough to force the instructor to leave. Overwhelmed by arrogance, the young man launched a devastating spiritual attack. The young warrior looked down on his opponent with pure contempt. He warned that regret would come too late for those he considered inferior. A companion grew frantic, pleading for the attack to stop. The risk of collateral damage was far too high. The young man ignored the warning and unleashed a torrent of spiritual energy. The blast tore through the air, striking with devastating force. Despite the chaos, the target remained unfazed, meeting the assault with a confident smirk. The young warrior was caught off guard. Shock washed over him as the situation shifted instantly. A cold presence emerged from the chaos. The stranger's gaze was piercing and devoid of mercy. The mysterious man remained completely unfazed. He stood as an immovable wall against the assault. The instructor revealed the gap in their power. He warned that the attack should have been fatal if he had truly intended to kill. With a display of overwhelming spiritual arts, the man lectured the youth on the danger of judging others by their appearance. The instructor warned that a single whim could have ended the fight. He lectured the youth on the fatal mistake of judging others by their appearance. Confusion took hold as the opponent struggled to comprehend the spiritual arts he had just witnessed. The man addressed the prejudice he faced due to his race, proving that his strength far surpassed any preconceived notions. With a confident smirk, the protagonist revealed his true role to the stunned crowd. The atmosphere shifted as the man took his place at the podium to address the students. The young man questioned the group's knowledge regarding the activation of spiritual magic. He demanded an answer, his voice laced with urgency. Doubt clouded the mind of a student, who wondered if the situation was merely a figment of imagination. The youth explained the fundamental process of shaping spiritual power through imagination. A calm voice intervened, acknowledging the importance of imagination, but correcting the fundamental misunderstanding. The instructor explained that spirits only manifested their power after receiving a specific wavelength. He further detailed that there were 8 basic wavelengths to master. A sudden discharge of energy served as a vivid demonstration. The lesson continued with a display of healing abilities. Finally, the power of freezing was showcased to the students. The instructor reminded them of the basic powers they should have already mastered. He continued to list the essential abilities required for their growth. Gravity manipulation was demonstrated to show the weight of true power. The lesson shifted as he showcased the brilliance of light manipulation. He then displayed the control of atmospheric pressure, leading into a final revelation. The instructor detailed the complexities of spatial protection and atmospheric pressure. He explained that mastering these fundamentals required a deep understanding of spiritual magic. The man emphasized that visualization was the key to replicating the powerful electrical strikes. A confident smile played on the teacher's lips as he prepared for the next step. With a sudden shift in energy, the instructor decided it was time to begin the actual lesson. The young man stood in the academy grounds, feeling the weight of his new surroundings. He realized that conducting an investigation in such a vast place would be a challenge. The constant presence of students made it impossible to find a secluded spot. A strategic decision was needed to find a location where he could operate undisturbed. The young woman watched him with a sharp, calculating gaze. The young woman was bewildered. Such a feat should have been impossible for someone of his standing. The man remained calm, treating the complex art as a simple matter of perception. Her disbelief turned into a reluctant admission. He was far from ordinary. While the man simplified the process, the young woman found his nonchalance irritating. Nearby students watched in awe, unable to comprehend the level of power being displayed. The young woman struggled to accept the ease with which he handled the magic. The man suggested a change in perspective to better understand the process. She remained skeptical, unable to reconcile his claims with her own knowledge. Her frustration grew as the man avoided giving a direct answer. The young woman demanded the truth about his mysterious past from millions of years ago. A direct question was posed about the stranger's activities from an ancient era. The man revealed his former identity as a secret agent. He described his life as a patriot who served his country. The protagonist recalled the endless battles he fought against countless villains. Despite the millions of years that had passed, the memories remained vivid. A sudden surge of nostalgia washed over the stranger. Memories of a distant past resurfaced with startling clarity. The events of 100 million years ago felt as if they had happened only yesterday. The man drifted back into his recollections, haunted by the ghosts of his former life. A blonde woman questioned how someone of his caliber could have remained dormant for such an eternity. The stranger simply admitted his failure. He wondered why he had been cast into such a long slumber, reflecting on the mistakes that led to his downfall. The stranger believed that sheer effort for his client would be enough to fix everything. That hope proved futile, and he ended up losing everything. He had accepted a position as an instructor, trusting that others would support him in times of need. The blonde woman wondered how much of that tragic history was actually true. Despite the doubts, the guide focused on her duty and led the way. The mysterious man arrived at the designated spot. He questioned the nature of the room, which served as a storage area for instructors. The young woman explained the purpose of the warehouse. A sharp realization crossed the man's mind. He wondered why this specific location was chosen, while the blonde woman revealed she was also conducting her own investigation. The blonde woman revealed that she had been conducting her own investigation in that very spot. She pointed out an unnatural gap in the wall, suggesting a hidden room existed. The discovery felt far too suspicious to be a coincidence. The mysterious man admitted that her theory seemed correct. Together, they stepped forward to uncover whatever secrets lay hidden behind the wall. The man decided to investigate the area alone, ordering the young woman to stay behind. She refused to be left behind, insisting on joining him. The man warned her about the dangers lurking inside, mentioning the threat of a corruptor. The young woman felt insulted by his caution and demanded that he stop underestimating her. She asserted her competence, claiming her academic standing was among the best of her year. The young woman refused to be sidelined. She demanded that her strength be acknowledged. She asserted that her skills were equal to those of her brother. The man finally relented, deciding to place his trust in her. As they descended deeper underground, the man used his light manipulation to guide the way. The oppressive atmosphere reminded the man of a fantasy world where monsters would lurk in the shadows. The young man felt as if he had stepped into a fantasy world where monsters could emerge at any moment. He shifted the conversation, questioning if the other had encountered any clues while fighting villains. The protagonist found the request excessive for a first day, though he eventually conceded. A sense of suspicion lingered as the young man pondered the situation. A name surfaced as a potential suspect, prompting an immediate question about how such a conclusion was reached. The young man considered a different suspect, though he remained uncertain. He noticed a strange detachment in the target's mind, a sign of someone forced away from their true purpose. Despite a facade of ignorance, the man's vigilance remained incredibly sharp. The protagonist dismissed the professor as a suspect, believing the man was too transparent to hide such secrets. He concluded that the teacher was likely a good person with no hidden agenda. The young man felt a sense of disbelief at his current surroundings. He marveled at the sheer scale of the hidden depths beneath the academy. A sudden realization sparked a question in his mind. The protagonist recognized the massive structure before him. It was the entrance to the research laboratory left behind by Kagura. The young woman stared in disbelief at the discovery. This was the legendary laboratory left behind by Kaglika. The massive door was sealed by advanced nanomachines, hidden deep beneath the academy. She wondered if entry was even possible, but the stranger knew the truth. The mysterious man explained that a specific access key was required to unlock the path. The stranger explained that a specific access key was the only way to open the sealed entrance. Hakama had once held that power, but it seemed someone else had inherited the key as well. The mysterious man realized the truth of the situation. He stepped forward to test his own authority against the ancient lock. The system recognized his high-level clearance and began to grant him entry. The system recognized the authority of the visitor. The seal finally broke. The heavy doors groaned as they slid open, revealing a dark void. The stranger stepped inside, his mind focused on the one responsible for the chaos in the country. A cold silence filled the air as they ventured deeper into the facility. Before them lay a terrifying sight. A definitive weapon remained imprisoned in the depths of the academy. The young girl was bewildered by how the stranger had gained entry. She questioned the lack of a security key, but the man simply noted that those from the ancient era possessed special privileges. Stunned by the revelation, the girl wondered if he truly hailed from a time millions of years in the past. The stranger ignored her questions, his attention shifting toward the monstrous creature locked behind bars. A sense of unease grew as the man observed the scene from a distance. The stranger found the situation peculiar. He wondered why the creatures were being captured so easily. The lack of resistance bothered him. It felt unnatural for such beings to be so docile. While other corrupted monsters showed signs of aggression, these ones remained strangely calm. The man recalled a similar instance involving the bandits. Their captive had also been eerily quiet in its cage. He stared at the massive entity before him. The sheer scale of the creature made its submission even more suspicious. The protagonist stared at the massive creature. Its sheer size was staggering. He wondered how such a beast had been transported to this place. The young woman confirmed that her brother's suspicions about the academy were correct. She proposed a plan to set a trap and lure out the mastermind. However, the man disagreed. He believed the academy had to be shut down and the corrupted purged first. The young woman struggled to accept the idea of letting the culprit escape. The stranger acknowledged her pain, but he had a different priority. He warned that if the corruptors grew out of control, the innocent students of the academy would be the first to suffer. The man reminded her that her own brother would have valued the safety of the people over the desire for revenge. The young woman finally conceded. The stranger felt a lingering sense of dread that he couldn't ignore. Trusting his intuition, the man decided to investigate the laboratory further before taking the next step. The young woman demanded a complete lockdown of the academy. She needed to know if she could rely on him. A silent agreement was reached. The deal was sealed. The stranger turned away, his mind already drifting toward the mysteries of the facility. He felt the weight of the current situation. A single clue could change everything. Time seemed to stand still as he contemplated the path ahead. Rumors spread quickly through the halls. Some students couldn't help but mock the situation. Sir Gita felt the sting of their laughter. The humiliation was becoming unbearable. He blamed everything on a race he considered inferior. His pride had been shattered. The idea of another's immense power seemed impossible. The man convinced himself it was all a trick. Consumed by rage, Sir Gita vowed to expose the truth himself. He would not let this insult stand. The director grew concerned. She asked the man to stop his strange behavior before the students became too frightened. The young man felt dismissed. He couldn't believe his efforts were being treated as a mere hobby. Shifting the conversation, the director asked if he had seen Sir Rudman. The man searched his memory. He realized the knight had been missing since the entrance ceremony. A heavy sigh escaped the director. She needed to discuss the new students' classes, but the situation was becoming stressful. The man was caught off guard by the sudden interruption. His attention shifted toward the horizon, where a sinister energy pulsed over the academy. Meanwhile, a young woman rushed through the corridors, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Panic drove her forward as she scrambled to find a way out. The girl struggled to compose herself, desperate to deliver an urgent warning. Miss Walton felt a crushing urgency to warn her brother. But a sudden voice shattered her focus. The young woman froze, her heart racing as she realized she was no longer alone. A towering figure emerged from the shadows, calling out to her with an unsettling calmness. Sir Rudman appeared before her, his presence filling the narrow space. The man wore a confident smile, though his gaze remained piercing and calculating. A blinding light erupted from the depths of the corridor. The mysterious man paused, unsettled by the sight. A pulsating core of energy thrummed with an eerie intensity. The protagonist felt a rhythmic vibration, as if the machine possessed a heartbeat. Suspicion grew as the man wondered if Kagura was the creator of such a device. Jin discovered a terminal that held the secrets he sought. Inside a secure case lay a messaging system and a nano-machine injector left behind by Kagura. The young man hoped these tools would provide a clue to explain the current chaos. Suddenly, a holographic projection flickered to life, revealing a man who had been waiting for Jin's arrival. The scientist spoke with confidence, guiding Jin toward the truth of the laboratory where he had first awakened. The scientist recalled the days spent in that laboratory. A groundbreaking device had been their primary focus. The secret to its power lay hidden. Essential functions were sealed deep within nanomachines. Pride filled the researcher as he reflected on his own brilliance. He wondered if the truth was obvious. The revelation hit the young man like a bolt of lightning. The device was designed for teleportation. The weight of that discovery left the protagonist speechless. The implications were staggering. The mysterious man stood before a nightmare. A monstrous entity remained imprisoned, waiting in the shadows. The creature loomed within its cage, a dormant terror from a forgotten age. Nearby, an ancient mechanism ticked. The gears of time continued to turn, indifferent to the horror. The complex dial aligned. Every movement brought the protagonist closer to a forbidden truth. The device pulsed with a violent energy. It was a relic of power that defied the laws of nature. The mysterious man pondered the nature of the teleportation device. This ancient technology allowed for the connection of two distant spaces, a feat impossible millions of years ago. The protagonist recalled Argus's warnings about monsters appearing in the royal capital. They had been sent through such a device. He remembered the creatures that had invaded the Great Hall, linking the events to a singular source. The man finally located the machine, but something felt wrong. The young man felt a strange sensation. Something about the atmosphere had shifted. He gazed at the pulsating core of the machine, questioning the true nature of the device. A sudden mechanism engaged. The gears of fate began to turn. The celestial alignment shifted, unlocking a power that had remained dormant for eons. An explosion of energy erupted, throwing the protagonist back as the seal finally broke. A monstrous entity remained trapped behind iron bars. Its presence radiated a suffocating malice. The creature strained against its confinement. A dormant power began to surge. The seal shattered in a blinding flash. The beast was finally free. The young warrior arrived at the royal capital. He was unaware that a nightmare had just been unleashed. A cold dread washed over the young man. He sensed that the worst possible scenario had occurred. The young woman confronted the man with intense fury. She suspected him of being behind the chaos. The stranger remained unfazed. He questioned why she looked so distressed. He addressed her with a mocking politeness, further fueling her anger. The man admitted that her suspicions were correct. He acknowledged that she had finally uncovered the truth. Despite her investigation, the man warned her that she had arrived far too late. Miss Walton was shaken. The warning she received felt like a death sentence. The man stood his ground with a chilling confidence. The time for waiting had ended. He admitted the timeline had shifted. A certain intruder had forced his hand. A sharp gaze revealed the depth of the man's hostility. The intruder was no longer just a nuisance. He had become a threat that needed to be eliminated. A gut feeling had guided the young man. He was just as troublesome as a certain older brother. The intruder had already managed to locate the hidden passage. The blonde woman wanted to erase every single worry. The intruder was right beneath them. She questioned if the man truly believed he could defeat her. The beast man smirked with absolute certainty. He was confident in his own power. The beast man roared with triumph. He believed his victory was absolute. The blonde woman watched with a mixture of confusion and irritation. She intended to show him the true meaning of power. A sudden movement caught everyone off guard. The young girl seized the opportunity to strike. The blonde woman remained unfazed. A confident smile played on her lips as she observed the chaos. The young girl let out a sigh of relief. The tension finally broke as she realized the danger had passed. Hakama claimed victory. The professor lay defeated, completely overwhelmed by the sudden attack. A blonde student questioned the intruder's presence. Hakama explained that the search for Jin had led her here. The situation outside had turned dire. The young girl insisted that Jin's help was now a necessity. Kudo provided the final clue. The companion confirmed that Jin had been seen entering the building. The blonde student grew curious about the newcomer. Kudo quickly introduced herself, hoping to make a good impression. The students watched in shock. Hakama had just struck down the professor. Panic turned into a cruel opportunity. One of the girls suggested framing a classmate for the assault. A sudden movement echoed through the room. Someone was approaching quickly. The young woman froze. A presence had entered the area. Jin arrived on the scene. He found the professor unconscious and the atmosphere heavy with tension. A panicked girl rushed to Jin with urgent news. The situation outside had spiraled out of control. Jin remained calm, though the news was grim. The creatures from the laboratory had vanished. The realization hit the young woman hard. The disappearance of the monsters meant something far worse. They hurried to the edge of the balcony. Below them, the city had become a living nightmare of fire and ash. Chaos reigned in the streets. Massive beasts tore through the population, leaving nothing but slaughter in their wake. A massive avian beast descended with terrifying speed. The young survivors could only watch in horror as the predator struck. The creature's talons slammed into the earth. The impact shattered the ground, leaving no room for escape. Another monstrosity emerged, towering over the city. Its presence signaled a coordinated assault on the capital. The beast let out a low, guttural growl. It surveyed the ruins, hunting for any remaining prey. A deafening roar ripped through the air. The monster unleashed its full fury, plunging the city into absolute chaos. The young woman gasped in horror. The target of the attack was the royal capital. Jin cursed his own hesitation. He realized that destroying the device immediately was the only way to prevent this. Panic surged as another companion spotted the threat. She desperately called out to Jin to look. A colossal monster materialized over the city. Its arrival brought a wave of destructive energy. The beast loomed over the residential district. The capital was now completely vulnerable to its wrath. A monstrous beast unleashed a devastating blast, aiming directly for the royal castle. The young women watched in terror as the colossal creature threatened the heart of the kingdom. Jin stepped forward, taking full responsibility for the crisis and vowing to end the threat. The young man activated a power enhancement, feeling the surge of energy course through his body. He recalled the scientist's warning about the nanomachines and the strict daily limit of this ability. A monstrous beast unleashed a devastating blast, aiming directly for the academy. The destructive beam tore through the sky, threatening to level the entire structure. The students watched in horror as the attack neared, unable to escape the onslaught. Jin intervened instantly, positioning himself between the innocent girls and the incoming fire. The young man activated his nanomachines, preparing to counter the strike with everything he had. A monstrous creature descended upon the city, bringing chaos and terror to everyone in its path. Panic surged through the halls as a young woman raced to deliver an urgent warning. She burst into the room, desperate to alert the guildmaster about the giant threat at the outer wall. Harden Ganslot remained calm, though the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him. The guildmaster admitted that their options were running out, despite the dire circumstances. The guildmaster had already called upon every available fighter to defend the city. He believed the Holy Knights should also be deploying every single soldier they had. However, a sudden revelation left the young woman in shock. Half of the Holy Knights were away from the capital on a mission. The city was left vulnerable, and a monstrous entity seized the moment to strike. The enemy had timed their strike perfectly. With the Holy Knights away, the city was left defenseless against a premeditated assault. The guildmaster wondered if the Grand Commander could have stopped this nightmare. For now, the situation seemed hopeless. A devastating blast tore through the skyline, bringing absolute chaos to the streets below. Panic surged as the witness questioned if this was the end. He frantically alerted the guildmaster to the horror unfolding before them. In that moment of despair, a single gaze shifted. Someone had noticed a presence amidst the destruction. The mysterious man unleashed a devastating surge of power. Observers watched in shock, recognizing the intruder's identity. The young woman realized exactly where the stranger originated from. A monstrous creature loomed over the ruins, unaware of the coming storm. The man braced himself, preparing a final, decisive strike. The mysterious man gathered his energy for a sudden strike. A massive beam of light erupted from his position. The blast tore through the air with overwhelming force. He remained calm, his gaze fixed on the target. The attack slammed into the creature, leaving a searing wound. The mysterious man questioned if such a massive foe could be defeated with a single strike. He realized that teleporting had drained more of his energy than anticipated, making this battle more challenging than usual. A decision was made to stop holding back. The warrior decided it was time to actually get some real exercise. He summoned his weapon, ready to unleash his full power. The mysterious man struck with a blinding flash of speed. The blow landed with devastating force, tearing through the beast. He leaped back, maintaining his distance from the creature. The warrior knew the monster would heal quickly, but the strike bought him a precious window of opportunity. A cold focus took over as the man prepared his next move. The mysterious man focused his mind, recalling the fundamental principles of nanomachines. He sought to manipulate gravity to negate his own weight. By altering atmospheric pressure, the man generated powerful gusts of wind to propel himself. Below him, the young survivor lay helpless as a monstrous beast loomed over him. A sudden, searing projectile tore through the air toward the creature. A searing blast of fire tore through the air. The projectile struck the monster with devastating force, saving the young man from certain death. Two young warriors appeared, revealing themselves as students from the Harnisk Academy. The survivor felt a surge of relief, grateful for the timely intervention of the brave students. The duo prepared for battle, knowing the royal capital remained in grave danger. The young warriors stood their ground. They knew that survival depended on their ability to endure the onslaught. A sudden movement broke the tension. The mysterious man acted with blinding speed. He tore through the battlefield, slicing through the monsters before the students could even react. The warriors watched in disbelief. They had never seen such overwhelming power. Confusion grew as they questioned the identity of their savior. It seemed impossible for someone of a lower race to possess such strength. The mysterious man seized the moment. He knew the creature needed time to recover and decided to strike fast. The beast let out a deafening roar, its form twisting in a surge of violent energy. A sudden, powerful blast erupted, catching the protagonist off guard. He leaped through the air, narrowly avoiding the devastating impact that shattered the ground. The young man remained calm. He realized that despite the flash of power, the monster was no longer a true threat. The mysterious man seized the opening. He moved with lethal precision to intercept the beast. He refused to give the monster a second chance. A decisive end was the only option. Every fiber of his being focused on speed. The protagonist pushed his limits to outpace the creature. He vanished from sight, reappearing instantly behind the massive enemy. A single devastating strike tore through the earth. The impact left nothing but destruction in its wake. The mysterious man struck with blinding speed, slicing through the air to intercept the behemoth. The creature was caught off guard by the sudden lethal precision of the attack. Nearby warriors watched in absolute shock, unable to comprehend the speed of the intervention. Panic and disbelief gripped the onlookers as they witnessed the impossible feat. The protagonist surged forward, closing the distance to deliver a final, crushing blow. A sudden flash of energy tore through the darkness. The strike was precise, carving through the beast's massive frame. The monster had no time to react to the overwhelming force. The attack continued to shred through the creature's hide. The behemoth's defenses crumbled under the relentless assault. The mysterious man faced the colossal beast. The scale of the enemy was overwhelming. He gathered his strength for one final strike. There was no room for error. With a sudden burst of power, the warrior launched himself forward. This was the end. The impact sent the monster flying backward. The creature's dominance vanished in an instant. A massive explosion of energy erupted, obliterating everything in its path. A massive explosion ripped through the city. The sheer force of the impact shook the very foundations of the earth. The shockwave reached the halls of the academy. Two companions froze in their tracks as the ground trembled beneath them. Confusion and fear took hold. The young woman struggled to comprehend the sudden chaos unfolding outside. Amidst the ruins, a mysterious man stood his ground. He remained calm even as a colossal beast loomed over him. The stranger's presence was overwhelming. His identity remained a mystery, but his power was undeniable. 3 days had passed since the chaos. The city began to recover, though the scars of the attack remained visible. From a window, the mysterious man looked down at the people below. The citizens seemed relieved that the danger had subsided. Despite the shock of the event, the damage was not as severe as feared. The situation had been contained. The young man sighed in relief. Much of the credit went to the efficiency of the Holy Knights. While the Knights held the line against the giant invader, other forces were free to secure the perimeter. The aftermath of the conflict was handled with surprising efficiency. To ensure a thorough investigation, the academy was placed under strict lockdown. Lord Ludman, suspected of leading the conspiracy, was quickly apprehended. The authorities didn't stop there, arresting the instructors and the director for their alleged involvement. The protagonist reflected on the situation with a sigh, knowing his brief tenure at the school had come to an abrupt end. Hardin Ganslot felt that the recent incident had left him with unfinished business. The warrior knew he could handle grouped enemies, but scattered foes proved far more difficult to eliminate. To protect everyone from future invaders, the young man realized he needed to increase his strength. He contemplated the path forward, determined to find a way to grow more powerful. A sudden sound at the door interrupted his thoughts, leaving him wondering who had arrived. The professor was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. A young noblewoman arrived with a graceful presence. She addressed the man with a playful yet respectful tone. The young woman explained that her older brother requested his presence. A gesture of gratitude was offered, though a deeper conversation awaited them. The professor questioned why the young woman had come to find him personally. She explained that sending a servant to someone of his status would have been far too rude. Representing her family, the noblewoman maintained a poised and graceful demeanor. The man wondered if she had finally stopped viewing him as an inferior species. With a sudden change in heart, the young woman claimed she had reflected on her prejudices and now sought to show respect. The young woman suddenly shifted her tone, pleading for guidance. This abrupt change in attitude left the other girl completely bewildered. However, the visitor quickly dropped the act. She admitted that boredom in the student dormitory had driven her to seek entertainment. The noblewoman's facade crumbled instantly. She felt insulted by the girl's casual intrusion. Anger flared as the young lady questioned the intruder's lack of manners. The promise of reflection had been a lie. The scene shifted to the Argus residence, a grand estate that stood as a symbol of power and prestige. The staff greeted the visitors with utmost respect. A warm welcome awaited them at the estate. The head butler requested the young assistants to lead the way. They accepted the task with enthusiasm. Lord Jin noticed how well the staff had adapted to their duties. The young servants expressed their gratitude. Concern grew as the man asked if the children had been harmed during the recent chaos. The young ones recalled the bravery of the staff. The servants had risked everything to keep them safe. Lord Jin received high praise for his recent achievements. The admiration for the man was evident. Curious about the source of the rumors, the young man questioned who had spoken of his deeds. The noblewoman proudly revealed her connection to the teacher. She felt a deep sense of duty to honor his legacy. She encouraged the others to follow the professor's example. The children eagerly agreed, inspired by the legend. Despite the current praise, the young boy remembered a different side of the lady. Her strictness had once been overwhelming. The young man noticed a surprising shift in the lady's demeanor. Her usual strictness had faded into something far more gentle. A small group gathered before the grand doors, awaiting their entrance. The maid announced the arrival of Lord Jin, signaling that they were finally welcome to enter. Inside, the protagonist found himself facing a pair of waiting figures. The man in the chair regarded the newcomer with a sharp, calculating gaze. The mysterious man was welcomed with warmth. He was invited to take a seat and make himself comfortable. Despite the sudden nature of the summons, the protagonist remained calm and unbothered. The knight decided it was time for formal introductions. He pointed toward the man sitting across from them. This was Lord Hardin Gunslot, the influential guildmaster assigned to the royal capital. A firm handshake sealed the meeting. Lord Hardin expressed his sincere pleasure in finally meeting the man. Hardin admitted that he had witnessed the man's impressive display of power. The guildmaster recalled the terrifying creature that had nearly plunged the entire nation into a crisis. Overwhelmed by gratitude, Hardin bowed his head to thank the stranger for saving the country. The mysterious man remained unfazed, dismissing his own role in the victory. He insisted that the credit belonged to the holy knights who had handled the aftermath. The guild master pondered the stranger's nature. Such humility seemed unusual for someone with such power. A question lingered in the air. The mysterious man wondered if their requests had been fully satisfied. The answer was a firm negative. The royal family of the land sought a personal meeting with the warrior. The news caught the protagonist off guard. He questioned the sudden involvement of the monarchy. Suspicion grew as the conversation shifted. The guildmaster felt there was something about this man that didn't add up. The interrogator boasted about his vast network of informants across the country. Despite these resources, the man admitted that the stranger's identity remained a complete mystery. Patience had run out. The interrogator demanded the truth without any more evasions. A direct question was posed. The young man's origin and his purpose for entering the country were now under scrutiny. The pressure mounted as the mysterious man was told that a response was no longer optional. The mysterious man remained calm under the pressure. The time for evasion had ended. The tension in the room peaked as the interrogators demanded to know the reason for his arrival. The young warrior showed no sign of backing down. He expected a full confession. With a casual gesture, the protagonist dismissed the idea that he had been hiding anything. The young woman admitted she had stayed silent, fearing that the truth sounded too unbelievable to be trusted. The young warrior decided to trust the stranger. He accepted the words at face value. A subtle smile played on the protagonist's lips. He felt the tension begin to shift. Then, the man revealed a shocking truth. He claimed to be a human from a distant past. The warrior was stunned. The revelation left him questioning everything he knew. He struggled to process the claim. The idea of someone sleeping within the forbidden village seemed impossible. The man found the claims hard to believe, yet he decided to trust the words. Miria spoke of a forbidden door hidden in the academy's basement. That ancient gateway was never meant to be opened. The young woman believed the master's true power had been witnessed by others. The young man looked at Miria, completely bewildered by the situation. The young warrior felt completely bewildered by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The mysterious man revealed that he had been in a deep slumber for an eternity. This long sleep explained why the stranger had traveled to the capital to gather knowledge about the current era. The beast man questioned the specific nature of the information the visitor sought. The mysterious man clarified that his first objective concerned the invaders. Ancient beings had existed long ago, dating back 100 million years. Under normal circumstances, these entities should have survived until the present day. The mysterious man explained that the answer lay within the power of the spirits. Eons ago, these spirits were scattered across the entire world. A massive surge of energy erupted, marking the beginning of a global dispersion. Spirits had been scattered across the entire world. The invaders were restricted to contaminated lands. However, the spirits possessed the unique ability to purify those corrupted environments. This revelation sparked a question about why the invaders still persisted in the current era. The mysterious man admitted his lack of specific knowledge on the matter. A sudden realization halted the conversation. The persistence of the invaders in this era remained a troubling mystery. The mysterious man shared information from an old acquaintance. It seemed the enemy was not stagnant, but evolving. The revelation left the beast man stunned. He wondered if such technology belonged to a civilization long forgotten. Confusion grew as the man questioned the inner workings of the device. The stranger admitted he was completely clueless. Doubt clouded the young man's mind. He struggled to believe that the person before him had truly lived for 100 million years. The mysterious man revealed his true purpose for visiting the capital. He sought a lead regarding ancient laboratories. One such facility lay hidden beneath the city, though the protagonist noted it was built by a former friend. His search extended to other laboratories scattered across the globe, but he decided to keep his quest for power a secret. The man's focus shifted. He had a singular, unwavering objective. He had come to this world for one reason. He intended to erase every last invader from existence. The group gathered in a tense silence. The mysterious man had made his goal clear: the complete eradication of the invaders. The beast man found the story hard to believe. The young knight agreed, though he seemed unsettled. Despite the absurdity of the claim, the young warrior decided to trust him. Their shared hatred for the enemy created an unexpected bond. The young knight warned that such a confession was dangerous. He believed the truth should remain a secret. The mysterious man understood the risk. He knew that speaking openly would only make him look like a madman. The young warrior decided to trust the man's words. He believed that such a secret should be kept hidden to avoid being labeled as insane. The young man reasoned that no one intending to cause harm would risk their own life to protect the castle. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by the arrival of the staff. The maid apologized for the intrusion, but she had an urgent matter to attend to. She reminded them that the scheduled time had arrived, prompting the knight to realize how quickly the hour had passed. The knight realized the appointed hour had finally arrived. He turned to his subordinates to delegate the final arrangements. The young man listened with a hint of confusion, though the assistants quickly agreed to the task. Without delay, the carriage began its journey. Every rotation of the wheels brought them closer to their destination. The massive fortress loomed ahead, its towering spires piercing the clear blue sky. As they approached the royal residence, the young man questioned the necessity of such formal attire for the visit. His companions disagreed, insisting that the outfit suited him perfectly. Even the staff were impressed, though the protagonist found the clothing restrictive and uncomfortable. The gravity of the situation became clear as the man was reminded that he was about to meet the first prince of the country. Despite the pressure to maintain appearances, the young man viewed the entire ordeal as a nuisance. The carriage arrived at the castle gates. The young man hoped he wouldn't get dragged into any more trouble. Royal guards stood in a disciplined line. Their presence signaled the importance of the meeting. The soldiers remained vigilant. Every detail of the reception was carefully orchestrated. The protagonist was presented to the royalty. He was hailed as the savior who had rescued the country from crisis. A commanding voice broke the silence. The royal figure ordered the young man to look up. The royal figure commanded the young man to raise his head. The young man finally faced his superior. A moment of realization struck as he recognized the person before him. Jin Shido knelt before the first prince, Tails Clamosia, showing his respect. The young man explained that he was acting as a representative for his ailing father. Jin Shido expressed his gratitude, while the prince acknowledged the reports of his origins. The prince acknowledged the young man's origins and offered his gratitude for the work accomplished. However, the noble's words carried a hidden sting, dismissing the boy's home village as insignificant. The prince decided to stop the pleasantries and get straight to the point. A demand was issued, forcing the young man into a position of servitude. As a holy knight of the realm, the protagonist was warned that his new life would be one of endless exhaustion. The young man remained silent, his gaze cold and unwavering. A noble questioned the silence with a mocking smile. A subordinate quickly intervened, explaining that the meeting had been requested by the nobility. The beast man grew anxious, attempting to stop the conversation before it went too far. The protagonist made his intentions clear. He had no desire to stay in the country for long. The stranger clarified that his time at the academy was only temporary. He had no intention of remaining in the country. His refusal sparked an immediate and cold reaction. The conversation shifted from curiosity to a threat. The atmosphere shattered in an instant. A sudden command echoed through the hall, and the guards moved in to surround the man. The attack was swift and brutal. The stranger was forced to the ground as the knights closed in. The knights reacted with immediate hostility. The situation escalated into chaos as the guards pinned the man down. The prince stepped forward with a cold gaze. He leveled a grave accusation of treason against the stranger. A forbidden secret was revealed. The prince pointed to a sealed door in the academy's basement where invaders had once hidden. The prince claimed the man had breached that ancient door. The evidence seemed damning, leaving the accused with no way out. A cruel smile played on the prince's lips. He questioned if the man's past heroic deeds were nothing more than a carefully crafted lie. The prince found the situation completely irrational. A cold silence filled the room. Despite the absurdity, the prince saw an opportunity to seize a great power. He was willing to overlook the truth if the man agreed to serve him. The young knight doubted the stranger's involvement. He reasoned that the man had only recently arrived in the city. The warrior remained convinced of the man's innocence, noting that the investigation of the academy had been requested by the prince himself. The young knight remained confused. He had personally requested the academy investigation, making the current accusation seem illogical. A sudden realization struck the warrior. He had overlooked the obvious signs of a trap. The captains of the 3rd and 4th units had arrived. These men were known for their unwavering devotion. Their loyalty to the first prince was absolute and fanatical. For the sake of their master, these soldiers were capable of committing any atrocity. From the very beginning, a dark plan existed. If the prisoner refused to comply, he was to be eliminated. The blonde nobleman recognized the captive's strength. Such power was far too dangerous to be left roaming free. However, the aristocrat decided to show a flicker of mercy. He offered the young man one final chance. A sinister demand followed. The nobleman wanted a sworn oath of absolute loyalty. Surrounded by armed guards, the prisoner found himself trapped in a cold, calculated game. The young man felt a deep sense of confusion. The situation made no sense to him. The blonde nobleman reacted with disbelief. He questioned the value of a mere verbal promise in such a place. The aristocrat argued that words were meaningless. If the prisoner managed to escape, any oath would be worthless. The protagonist saw through the facade. He believed the nobleman only wanted to hear the words of submission. The young man began to analyze the hidden motives. He wondered if this was merely a desire for dominance or if something deeper was at play. The mysterious man suspected a hidden truth. He sensed that the situation was far more complex than it appeared. The protagonist remained calm. He demanded silence to maintain control of the moment. A horned warrior took offense. The man felt insulted by the perceived lack of respect. The young man ignored the outburst. He insisted that the other listen to his words. Tension peaked as the protagonist tightened his grip. A decisive move was about to be made. The horned warrior felt a sudden surge of confusion. He questioned the strange turn of events. A swift movement caught the man off guard. He had no time to react. The attack happened in an instant. The warrior was completely blindsided. He crashed to the floor with violent force. The blow left him breathless and defeated. The protagonist looked down with cold indifference. He demanded the warrior's full attention. The protagonist demanded an answer with a cold, piercing gaze. The young man trembled, overwhelmed by a sudden wave of anxiety. A female warrior reacted with sudden hostility, recognizing the intruder. Panic set in as the woman realized her spiritual arts had been completely sealed. She ordered her subordinates to seize the man, launching a desperate assault. The young warrior launched a fierce attack, but the protagonist reacted with effortless precision. A single, powerful strike sent the aggressor flying backward. The protagonist tightened his grip on the weapon, remaining completely unfazed. With a sweeping motion, the man neutralized the surrounding guards in an instant. A royal figure watched in disbelief, demanding to know why Argus refused to join the fray. The royal guard felt a surge of indignation. He was ordered to punish the insolence shown to the royal family. With a swift motion, the soldier drew his blade. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. The young warrior remained calm, almost apologetic, as he prepared himself for the clash. From the balcony, the nobleman laughed with sadistic glee. He cared little for the outcome, as long as the target was eliminated. On his command, the knights lunged forward. The protagonist was suddenly surrounded by a wall of steel. A surge of overwhelming power erupted from the man. The air crackled with an intensity that defied explanation. The royal guards lunged forward, but their coordinated strike was met with an impenetrable force. The blonde man remained unfazed. He acknowledged the danger his freedom posed to those around him. A chilling confidence filled the air. The protagonist claimed that destroying the entire city would be a simple task. Despite his immense power, the young man sought a different path. He desired to stand with the people and protect them. The blonde man declared his purpose. He sought to be a shield for those living in the present. However, his compassion had limits. A cold realization dawned that not everyone deserved mercy. For those who treated human life with indifference, the protagonist promised a ruthless end. He turned his gaze toward Tails Clumosia. The young man was forced to question which side he truly stood on. A heavy silence fell as the weight of the ultimatum pressed down on the opponent. The warrior stood her ground, questioning the weight of the decision. She remained unfazed by the chaos around her. A deep sense of indignation fueled the woman. She could not stand by while injustice was forced upon those who dared to resist. The fallen soldier struggled to comprehend the situation. He feared the consequences of defying an entire nation. The protagonist remained calm, shifting the blame back onto the oppressors. He believed the conflict had been started by those in power. The elder advisor demanded respect for the crown. He insisted that true nobility required following the established laws of the land. The young knight demanded that the royal laws be respected. He was willing to cooperate, provided the request remained reasonable. A female warrior stepped forward with fierce conviction. She refused to submit blindly to irrational demands. Tension mounted as the soldier questioned the fairness of the situation. He warned that force would only lead to rebellion. The protagonist shifted the tone, pausing to challenge the other man. A pointed question was about to be asked. He questioned if the man was merely a fool who believed everything would go his way. The air grew heavy with suspicion. The blonde nobleman grew suspicious. He wondered if the young man was something other than human. The protagonist remained unfazed. A cold intensity filled his gaze as he faced the accusation. The tension was suddenly broken. An unexpected presence revealed that the entire conversation had been overheard. A soft footstep echoed through the hall. The mysterious listener stepped forward into the light. Lady Charlotte appeared with a playful smile. She asked if she could join the discussion. Charlotte stood before the group with an air of effortless grace. Her presence commanded the room. A horned warrior knelt in submission. He addressed the young woman with deep reverence. A knight arrived on the scene. The young man felt he had made it just in time. The knight stepped back to let the royal take center stage. He recognized the second princess. Charlotte smiled playfully. She wondered if her older brother had been enjoying himself. The blonde nobleman froze. The mention of that name sparked a flicker of agitation. His gaze sharpened. A cold, calculating intensity took over as he processed the situation. The young man realized the truth. Everything had finally fallen into place. Charlotte stepped forward to voice her disapproval. She felt neglected by the current arrangements. The princess believed her status entitled her to a place by the hero's side. The blonde nobleman gritted his teeth, unable to hide his growing frustration. He spoke with disdain, claiming that the man before them was far from a hero. The nobleman's voice grew colder as he branded the stranger a criminal who had dared to defy the royal family. A witness stepped forward to confirm the accusations, claiming the man had even wounded a high-ranking captain of the Holy Knights. A young girl interrupted the chaos, questioning if the royal party had not been the ones to act disrespectfully first. The blonde nobleman pointed an accusing finger, claiming the stranger had attempted to harm the first prince. A young woman questioned the validity of the accusation, suggesting the situation was far simpler. She addressed Jin Shido, seeking confirmation of the truth. The young man calmly admitted his presence, explaining he had merely been asking questions. The woman challenged her elder brother, mocking the idea of labeling someone a criminal for such a trivial act. The young woman mocked the nobility's cruelty toward the kingdom's hero. She formally introduced herself to Jin Shido. The woman clarified that she sought a friendship based on mutual aid rather than forced servitude. Jin Shido accepted the offer, promising to lend his strength. Grateful for his response, the woman suggested they find a more private place to talk. The blonde nobleman seethed with anger. His patience had finally reached its limit. He demanded that everyone clear the way, unable to tolerate such blatant disrespect. The tension in the air grew heavy as the confrontation escalated. A moment of silence passed under the vast, open sky. The carriage finally passed through the castle gates, leaving the chaos behind. The young man felt a sudden chill. A lingering sense of dread haunted him. He tried to justify his actions as a mere impulse, yet a strange presence had guided him. The protagonist struggled to make sense of the feeling, eventually dismissing it as a trick of the mind. A graceful woman appeared, accepting the gratitude for her recent assistance. The noblewoman insisted that the apology belonged to her side, acknowledging the poor treatment the hero had endured. The royal family felt the need to make amends for the poor treatment the hero had suffered. Charlotte formally introduced herself as the second princess. While the princess hoped for a lasting friendship with Jin, a troubling question lingered regarding the prince's extreme actions. Charlotte admitted she didn't know the exact motives, but described her older brother as a man driven by ambition. The prince envisioned a future of conquest, planning to expand his territory through bloody wars once he claimed the throne. The prince harbored a dark ambition. Once he claimed the throne, he intended to bathe the world in blood to expand his empire. In such a ruthless vision, Jin was nothing more than an obstacle that needed to be removed. The princess sought to reassure him. She vowed that no one would ever lay a hand on the young man again. She believed their father had already been informed of the situation. If the king imposed restrictions, the prince's movements would be limited. Despite the plan, the silver-haired young man remained uneasy. He had no intention of letting his older brother seize power so easily. Charlotte sought to earn Jin's trust. She wanted him to believe in her sincerity. The young man considered her words. He decided to accept her gesture for now. As the carriage moved forward, the group discussed their destination. The royal party felt a deep debt to the savior of their land. The knights agreed that such a feat deserved a proper reward. Leaving him empty-handed would have been an unthinkable cruelty. They had already tracked his current location. The group prepared to surprise him at the inn where he stayed. The royal group approached with an air of excitement. They had a special surprise waiting for the guest. Charlotte beamed with joy. She wanted to show him the reward they had carefully arranged. Jin stared in disbelief. He could not believe what he was seeing. Before them stood a magnificent estate. Its grandeur was overwhelming. The noble explained that the villa was far from the capital. It was now his to use as he pleased. The doors swung open, revealing the guests to their destination. Jin stood frozen in awe. The sheer scale of the interior was breathtaking. He questioned if such a lavish gift was truly appropriate for him. Charlotte explained that the estate once belonged to a count, but it had long been abandoned. A flicker of doubt crossed the young woman's mind as she wondered if the previous owner might one day return. Jin felt overwhelmed by the generosity. Such a grand gesture seemed far too excessive for him. The blonde nobleman dismissed his concerns with a smile. He insisted the gift was merely a token of their gratitude. With a welcoming gesture, the young man invited Jin to enter. This opulent estate was now his home. As the protagonist explored the residence, he marveled at the sheer luxury of the dining hall. Every room he entered felt like a palace. The scale of the place was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Jin remained silent, processing the situation with a thoughtful gaze. The protagonist felt overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the estate. Even a single bedroom felt far too vast for one person. The blonde nobleman offered a solution with a cheerful smile. He promised to arrange for servants to maintain the residence. The young man assured Jin that his staff would be delighted to serve him. Gratitude filled the blonde nobleman, though he worried that they were becoming far too indebted to the protagonist. A request was made, leaving the young man to ponder the hidden meaning behind the words. The scene shifted to a place of discipline and strength. This was the exclusive training ground of the 7th Squadron, where only the elite honed their skills. Two warriors clashed with intensity, their blades locking in a fierce struggle for dominance. A sudden strike broke the rhythm, as a female warrior launched a decisive attack. Karina fought with everything she had, but the gap in skill was too wide. The battle reached its breaking point. Defeat was inevitable, and the young warrior finally admitted her surrender. The tension vanished as the fight came to an abrupt end. Her mentor praised the progress Karina had made, though the girl remained humble about her growth. Karina received praise for her progress, but the young warrior felt she still had a long way to go. A bitter memory resurfaced. During a previous incident, she had only been able to handle the weakest enemies. One particular opponent haunted her thoughts. The monster had been an overwhelming force. The memory of that defeat brought back a surge of frustration. Karina couldn't fathom how a supposedly inferior race could possess such power. The sudden arrival of the captain and Lady Charlotte interrupted her spiral of doubt. The royal group arrived with an air of authority. The blonde nobleman commanded the soldiers to resume their training without delay. A young woman watched the scene with growing agitation. She could not fathom why the stranger had been brought there. Her confusion turned into open frustration. The girl questioned the purpose of the visitor's presence before the entire squad. Lady Charlotte remained composed. The noblewoman gracefully accepted a gesture of respect as she was guided away. The white-haired man questioned the objective of this meeting. In response, the prince suggested that the reason for his arrival should be obvious. The soldiers were stunned by the proposal. The blonde nobleman confirmed that their training was now in the stranger's hands. The young man reminded them of the lesson they had just learned. Prince Tails no longer cared for mere appearances. A dangerous power struggle had emerged. Lady Charlotte and Prince Tails were now locked in a battle for the throne. The 7th Squad stood ready. They had sworn their absolute loyalty to protect Lady Charlotte at any cost. The decisive moment was approaching. The nobleman demanded that the soldiers be prepared for the coming conflict. The young nobleman watched the sparring session in silence. He analyzed every movement with a critical eye. The combatants displayed impressive skill. Their level of proficiency was undeniable. A commander observed the fallen soldiers. Their discipline was a result of grueling daily routines. One warrior refused to stay down. Pure willpower drove the man to push past his limits. Even the elite guard felt the intensity of the struggle. The sheer effort left the warrior breathless. The young man felt a wave of nostalgia. The current scene stirred memories of a distant past. Long ago, the protagonist pushed his body to the absolute limit. He endured grueling training to serve his country as an official agent. The recruits gathered quickly upon command. They stood ready for the next phase of their instruction. A special guest had been brought in to elevate their skills. The kingdom's hero was introduced as their new instructor. The blonde commander promised that the hero would teach them everything they lacked. The soldiers responded with unwavering obedience. The instructor stood before the group, ready to begin. He believed that breaking the spirit of the obedient was the easiest way to teach. The man decided to start by testing the physical endurance of every recruit. A simple order was given to run laps around the training grounds. One of the women found the request insulting, claiming their strength was already proven. Karina felt the training was unnecessary. She believed the group's endurance was already more than sufficient. The young woman grew bold, questioning the purpose of the instructor's visit and dismissing his methods as foolish. The instructor remained calm, though the tension in the air shifted as he acknowledged Karina's outburst. He found her attitude disrespectful. To address the insolence, the man decided to change his approach. A confident smile played on the instructor's lips as he prepared a more personal lesson. The instructor questioned the young woman about her weapon of choice. He proposed a daring challenge to prove his worth. The man promised to cancel his orders if she could land a single blow on him. He believed that no one would accept guidance from someone weaker than themselves. With a sudden movement, the instructor demonstrated his mastery of the spear. The young man accepted the challenge with ease. The witnesses watched in disbelief as the situation unfolded. He moved with a precision that left no room for doubt. The warrior boasted that no weapon was beyond his mastery. This confidence was rooted in a legacy from 100 million years ago. The young man trained with relentless intensity. Every movement was a testament to his discipline. He switched his weapon with seamless precision. A new challenge had begun. An observer watched the display of skill. The sudden change in weaponry did not go unnoticed. Kagura paused, catching his breath. The physical toll of the session was evident. His companion questioned his obsession. It seemed the warrior knew no other way to spend his time. The man in the lab coat questioned the warrior's obsession. He wondered if the young man had any interest beyond his grueling training. A suggestion of rest was offered, but the warrior remained focused. He accepted a drink without breaking his disciplined demeanor. For the warrior, leisure was a luxury he could not afford. His life was defined by dangerous infiltration missions into enemy territory. Often, the young man was deployed with nothing. He had learned to turn any available object into a lethal weapon to survive. Mastery over every tool was a necessity. To increase his chances of survival, he vowed to dominate any weapon that fell into his hands. The researcher understood the necessity of such a mindset. In a world this cruel, every small advantage counted toward survival. A promise was made to innovate. The young man sought to create something that would ensure he never faced defeat again. This resolve was forged through relentless combat. He pushed his body to the limit, clashing with opponents in a blur of steel. No strike was wasted. The warrior intercepted the attack with precision, turning the tide of the battle in a single moment. A cold, calculating gaze took over. He analyzed the situation, searching for the perfect opening to end the fight. The weapons clashed with a violent impact. The force of the blow echoed through the training grounds. The young woman struggled to keep her footing, every muscle in her body strained against the overwhelming pressure. Her opponent remained unfazed. The silver-haired man demanded more from her, pushing her toward her absolute limit. Frustration boiled over as the young warrior recalled her string of defeats. She refused to let another failure define her. Driven by desperation and pride, she launched another assault. She forced herself to move faster, desperate to break through his defense. The two warriors clashed in a violent exchange of blows. The air crackled with the intensity of their struggle. A momentary pause allowed for a flicker of realization. The pressure of the fight was mounting. The silver-haired man remained composed. He noted that the young woman's movements and reactions were surprisingly sharp. She pushed herself further, pouring every ounce of her strength into the attack. The intensity of her resolve grew with every strike. The warrior felt the raw power behind each impact. He recognized this as the evolved strength of humanity. A sudden impact shook the ground. The weapon struck with precision, ending the exchange. The silver-haired warrior remained calm. He declared that the fight had reached its limit. Despite the defeat, the young woman refused to give up. Her spirit remained unbroken. The man sighed. He believed that further effort was pointless. The silver-haired warrior pointed out a critical flaw. The young woman's movements grew weaker as the fight continued. He saw through her facade. While her physical abilities were impressive, her endurance was lacking. The man analyzed her style with a critical eye. To him, her technique lacked the necessary refinement. Memories of a different era surfaced. In his time, combat relied on spiritual arts rather than raw strength. The warrior recalled a world where fighters required skills on an entirely different level. The silver-haired warrior emphasized the need for greater physical endurance. He questioned if the young woman still had any objections. Frustration boiled over within her. The defeat felt bitter and unfair. The young woman struggled to comprehend his effortless strength. While she was exhausted, the man remained completely composed. Despite her pride, she could no longer deny the truth. The gap between them was undeniable. The warrior looked on, unaware of the internal admission she had just made. The young woman felt a surge of tension. Doubt and apprehension clouded her mind. A firm grip sealed the agreement. The pact was finally made. Nearby observers watched the interaction with curiosity. The time for hesitation had ended. The group prepared themselves for the challenge ahead. It was time to put their resolve to the test. Far away, a different kind of surveillance took place. A silent observer watched from the shadows. A sudden arrival broke the silence of the dungeon. The visitor approached the prisoner, who remained unmoved in his chains. A smug smile played on the man's lips as he recognized the captive. The blonde nobleman identified the prisoner as the mastermind behind the chaos. Lord Ludman stared back, his expression cold and defiant. Lord Ludman refused to cooperate. The prisoner remained silent, offering nothing to his interrogator. The blonde nobleman found the man's composure intriguing. He suspected a hidden agenda behind that calm facade. A sinister curiosity grew. The nobleman wondered if the captive was still plotting in the shadows. A dark prophecy was uttered. The royal family was doomed, and their downfall seemed inevitable. The nobleman reached for a hidden prize. He possessed a secret that could change everything. the blonde nobleman revealed a mysterious artifact. The sight left the beastman completely stunned. Shock turned into disbelief. The creature could not fathom how the young man possessed such forbidden knowledge. This tool was known as a shinki. It served as a vessel to contain the immense power of invaders. A dark realization dawned. The nobleman suspected that a similar device had been used in a past tragedy. The tension escalated. The young man decided it was time to move past pleasantries and begin the real negotiation. The blonde nobleman struck a chord. He offered an alliance based on a shared hatred for the royal family. A vision of chaos emerged. The young man believed the current leadership was too naive to prevent the nation's inevitable collapse. The beastman questioned the logic. He wondered why someone of royal blood would seek to destroy their own lineage. The answer was absolute. The protagonist envisioned a world burned to the ground and rebuilt with true strength. A specific price was set. To achieve this new order, the nobleman required the power of the shinki. The nobleman was honest about the limits of his promise. He couldn't guarantee a crown, but he offered a different kind of power. A steep price was demanded. In exchange for his support, the blonde man required an absolute oath of loyalty. The beastman hesitated, questioning the necessity of such a bond. The nobleman warned that betrayal would be an unacceptable risk. Hidden behind a mask of cooperation, the warrior felt only contempt. He viewed the request as foolish and planned to discard the nobleman once he was no longer useful. Driven by a deep-seated hatred for the royal bloodline, the man agreed. He pledged his allegiance, sealing a pact built on mutual deception. The blonde nobleman sought confirmation of the pact. He wanted to ensure the bond was sealed. A mysterious artifact pulsed with a sinister purple light. The trap was already in motion. The beastman remained unaware of the danger. He believed he had successfully deceived his new ally. The warrior's confidence vanished as the magical energy surged. He felt the weight of his words crashing down on him. The shinki functioned as a cruel instrument of control. It turned a spoken lie into an unbreakable mental shackle. A powerful suggestion could bend the will of any man. Even a lie became truth if spoken with enough conviction. The blonde nobleman looked down upon his subject. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The beastman surrendered his autonomy. He offered his absolute obedience to his new master. Such submission only fueled the nobleman's disgust. He viewed those of common blood as nothing more than filth. To the aristocrat, these people were merely disposable tools. They were pawns to be used in his grand design to rule the kingdom. The silver-haired man felt a deep sense of responsibility. He believed it was his duty to lead the nation toward a better future. Every step forward was a testament to his resolve. Despite the exertion, the young man found a strange satisfaction in the physical strain. He decided that the training session had gone on long enough. The protagonist looked back at his exhausted companions. The sight reminded him of old sports stories from a bygone era. The blonde warrior apologized for his intensity, but Jin didn't mind. The experience had revealed a critical weakness in his own endurance. He realized that relying on horses and quick spiritual battles had left his physical stamina lacking. Determined to improve, the young man decided to focus his efforts on strengthening his body. As the conversation shifted, Jin felt a sudden change in the atmosphere. The princess questioned if it was truly acceptable for her to stay, fearing she might be an inconvenience. The young woman felt a sudden wave of anxiety. She worried that her prolonged absence would lead to a stern reprimand. Before departing, the elf decided to address a pressing matter. She sought confirmation from Jin regarding a specific discovery. A mysterious object was revealed. The woman questioned if the young man had ever encountered something like it before. Jin was puzzled by the strange item. The elf explained that the object had been seized from one of the primary culprits. The artifact had been confiscated in secret. Lord Ludman was the one entrusted with its safekeeping. The elf described a demonic tool that harnessed the power of invaders. The young man listened with growing curiosity. Its origins and creation remained a complete mystery. Yet the artifact promised immense power to anyone brave enough to use it. Jin remained silent, processing the weight of this revelation. A flicker of recognition crossed the young man's mind. He wondered if such a thing still existed in this era. The elf noticed his reaction. It seemed the description of the mechanical base felt strangely familiar to him. A dangerous object had been discovered beneath the academy. To prevent any catastrophe, the decision was made to destroy it. Jin realized that the silver-haired man was the one who had identified the device as the cause of the incident. The elf believed the action was necessary. Leaving the artifact behind would have allowed the enemy to reclaim it. Driven by curiosity, the young woman decided to investigate the true origins of the object. She asked Jin to share any information he might uncover, and the young man agreed to her request. The silver-haired man pondered the nature of the Shinki. He warned his companion about the danger of another incident and urged for constant vigilance. The young warrior sensed something was off and questioned the man's sudden distraction. The silver-haired man recalled how the invaders had suddenly ceased their violence. He wondered if the Shinki's power had forced them into submission. However, a different theory emerged. It felt as though the enemies had waited by their own choice. The silver-haired man noticed a disturbing level of synchronization among the enemies. He wondered if something beyond known powers explained such coordination. The realization left the young nobleman unsettled. The precision of the attack was far too perfect. The researcher explained that these creatures were not static. They adapted and evolved based on the environment they inhabited. A terrifying possibility emerged. A new variant had appeared, one capable of leading and organizing the swarm. The young man processed the information. The threat was far more sophisticated than they had initially feared. 4 days had passed since the incident at Harnisk Academy. The atmosphere remained heavy with the aftermath of the disaster. The director felt a deep sense of frustration. Being detained for an entire week was an unexpected turn of events. Despite the gratitude shown by the knights, the woman insisted she had no involvement in the chaos. She shifted the blame toward the incompetence of others within the academy, though her expression remained grim. The knight tried to reassure her, but the director admitted that her presence was the only thing that prevented a total catastrophe. The silver-haired man remained humble, insisting that the director should not worry about the outcome. Having heard the full story, the director questioned the young man's true identity and his connection to the Holy Knights. The protagonist confirmed the truth, admitting he was merely a temporary hire brought in for investigation. A heavy silence filled the room as the weight of the situation settled between them. Overcome with emotion, the director bowed deeply to express his sincere gratitude for the protection of the kingdom and his students. The silver-haired man maintained a calm and composed demeanor. A blonde nobleman looked on, questioning the man's future intentions. The protagonist admitted that his original goal had been infiltration. He explained that financial needs had forced him to continue working as a teacher. However, a generous reward for the recent incident changed everything. The director offered a way out by finding a replacement. However, the young man refused the offer. The director remained firm. Since the position had been accepted, the responsibility could not be ignored. Leaving after only 1 day was deemed unacceptable. The blonde nobleman realized the logic was sound. Despite the protests, the director insisted that this decision was not made out of malice. With the matter settled, the director led the way, leaving no room for further argument. The two men walked through the halls of the academy. A sudden thought crossed the mind of the silver-haired man. He questioned the blonde nobleman about the current whereabouts of Professor Gita. The young man paused, recalling the teacher's situation. Professor Gita remained imprisoned, desperately claiming his innocence from behind bars. The nobleman explained that the professor had been acting erratically and had even tried to humiliate others. The blonde nobleman dismissed the reports of strange behavior. He decided the prisoner was harmless and ordered his release. An older woman intervened, reminding the group that a trap had been set. She believed a period of reflection was necessary. The conversation shifted as they reached their destination. The woman welcomed them to the area. She gestured for them to enter, guiding the men inside. The silver-haired man froze. Something about the situation felt wrong. The young woman was caught completely off guard. A massive crowd had gathered, their excitement filling the air. Jin questioned the sudden commotion, but the answer was simple. Word had spread quickly. Everyone wanted to see the hero who had saved the country. Not everyone was impressed, however. Some found this sudden change of heart pathetic. The young woman felt disgusted by the sudden change in everyone's attitude. To her, their newfound admiration for the master felt hypocritical. A blue-haired student stepped forward. She felt a desperate need to confess something to Jin. Her mind drifted back to a specific day. In a moment of rebellion, the girl had skipped her classes to explore the city. The carefree outing had taken a dark turn. A sudden realization of danger struck her. A monstrous creature had emerged from the shadows, leaving the young woman completely defenseless. The blue-haired girl felt a deep sense of longing. She wanted to be part of that strength. The young man remained stoic, unaware of the impact he had on those around him. An older woman placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, acknowledging his unique position. His peers gathered close, their admiration masking a desperate desire for his guidance. The student made her request. She hoped the instructor would agree to train her. A terrifying creature emerged from the ruins. The young man stood no chance against such a beast. Despair clouded the young man's mind. He questioned the nature of the horror facing him. In a sterile environment, the researcher confirmed the grim reality. The government had a specific name for these entities. These monsters were born from the worst impulses of humanity. They were the physical manifestation of corruption and depravity. The scientist explained their lethal advantage. These creatures thrived where the world was most contaminated. Sana realized the grim implications of the situation. The truth was becoming clear. A terrifying reality unfolded. Humanity had no place left to hide from the coming storm. Jin remained silent, weighed down by the gravity of their predicament. Sana tried to break the tension, questioning why the young man looked so defeated. Kazama and Mizuki joined in, mocking the loss of the protagonist's usual confidence. Jin realized the gravity of the situation. Their new enemy was something far beyond human comprehension. Conventional weaponry proved useless. Even the most powerful missiles failed to leave a scratch on the beast. Doubt began to spread among the soldiers. They wondered if victory was even possible against such a nightmare. A sudden presence interrupted the gloom. A confident woman stepped forward to confront the young man. She challenged him, questioning if he truly lived up to his reputation as the nation's strongest agent. The woman questioned if he truly deserved the title of the nation's strongest agent. She mocked the young man for his unsettling composure. Jin remained silent while she discussed a plan to neutralize their enemies by purifying the environment. The protagonist examined the holographic data of a device designed to restore the contaminated world. The weight of humanity's survival rested on a technology that was not yet complete. The woman spoke with absolute confidence. She believed their victory was inevitable. She sought confirmation from the young man, challenging his silence. A smug smile played on her lips as she waited for his agreement. But the outcome shifted in an instant. The warrior collapsed, defeated and broken. Hope vanished as the man lay motionless in the rain. The battle had ended far too quickly. Jin stood alone amidst the ruins. The silence of the wasteland was broken only by the falling rain. The young man remained motionless. He felt the weight of the carnage surrounding him. Blood stained his face, but his gaze remained sharp. He searched for any sign of life. A familiar voice echoed through the debris. Jin froze in disbelief at the sound. Sana lay broken against the rubble. Despite her injuries, a faint smile touched her lips. Jin desperately tried to save her, but the woman knew her time had run out. She gripped his hand tightly, urging the young man to listen to her final wishes. Her last request was simple. She didn't ask him to save the world, only to keep fighting. The weight of her words sank in. Jin felt a new, burning resolve ignite within him. In the pouring rain, a silent promise was made amidst the ruins. Through the static of the radio, a desperate voice reached out. Kagura answered, confirming the connection. A grim determination took hold. The young man vowed to handle the human experiment and the nanomachines himself. A cold warning echoed through the rain. Adaptation was the only way to survive in a world that showed no mercy. Despite the agony and the blood, the warrior refused to break. He would not surrender to this nightmare. Suddenly, the chaos vanished. The man jolted awake, gasping for air as the vision faded. The young man jolted awake, confused if the nightmare had been real. His gaze fell upon the mysterious cubes resting nearby. He reached out and gripped the object, feeling its cold surface. A dark resolve filled the protagonist. He vowed never to forget the pain. The device projected a holographic image of his former comrades, fueling his desire to reclaim what was lost. Peace reigned over the fortress city of Mermos in the kingdom of Cremosia, but it was about to be shattered. A messenger arrived in a state of pure panic, desperate to deliver urgent news. The young man warned that an invasion had begun, launched by the enemies from the north. Glen Oaths remained calm. The Grand Commander of the Holy Knights already sensed the approaching doom. Beyond the walls, a nightmare unfolded as a massive army of monsters descended upon the city. A concentrated surge of energy gathered in the palm of the hand. The power reached its peak, vibrating with intensity. The sheer scale of the energy was overwhelming, leaving the attacker breathless. A devastating beam of light erupted, obliterating everything in its path. The Beastman watched in shock, unable to believe the sudden disappearance of his allies. Shock surged through the Beastman. He couldn't believe his allies had been wiped out so effortlessly. The commander acted quickly. He ordered his men to alert the king while he prepared to hold the line. Confusion clouded the warrior's mind. He questioned how an invader could neutralize spiritual magic and force such an unlikely alliance. A dark presence emerged from the mist. The mysterious man stood flanked by monstrous entities, radiating an oppressive aura. The intruder watched the chaos with cold indifference. Something was happening to the invaders, and the answer remained hidden in the shadows.